Well, I believe it's 7 o'clock. I'd like to call the February meeting of the Board of Managers to order, and let's start with a roll call attendance. Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Present.
Manager Duval,
Present.
Manager Cook,
Present.
Manager Ziegler,
Present.
President Pedersen.
Present.
All managers present.
Thank you. I would like to just start with this meeting and remind the group that we would like to try to conclude the meeting by 10 p.m. So we're all going to try to shoot for that, we hope, today. And also, we would like to try to follow Robert's Rules of Order with a conversation limit of 10 minutes. I believe what we're going to be trying to do in the future is to be able to have the technology so that there is a counter on the screen and we'll know exactly how long everything is so everyone can see it. But until we have the technology in place, we'll just do the very best that we can. Okay, next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do I have some sort of a motion?
Make a motion to approve the agenda as written. Second.
Thank you, Manager Ziegler and Manager Duval. Do I have any discussion at all?
Madam President,
Yes.
I'd like to remove items 7B, 7D, 7F, and 7G from the
So that-
consent agenda.
So that's 7B, D, F, and G. Is that
Correct.
correct?
That is correct.
All righty. Any other changes anybody else has? If not, Mr. Smith.
Madam President, before calling the roll, I just want to acknowledge that we're meeting in a hybrid meeting
Thank you.
condition due to an abundance of caution about the COVID-19 and recognizing that this meeting is held in person, but also for a manager that may, based on advice from a healthcare professional, have a legitimate reason for not attending meeting in a public place in person, such as COVID-19 exposure infection, and in such circumstances, what may participate in the meeting remotely, and members of the public may participate in person or remotely by accessing the virtual meeting link. With that, let me also then call on the roll for approving the motion to approve the agenda as amended. Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
So the next item on the agenda is our matters of public interest. Do we have anybody that would like to speak to the board today? Anybody on screen? We do. All right, so
President Pedersen, I see Ms. Santamaria has her hand up. Were you wishing to speak, Maya?
She had chatted saying that she cannot hear anything.
Okay,
And
all
then
right.
somebody else said I cannot either, but it seems that Manager Cook can hear us, so we
Okay,
know at least somebody can. I don't know.
anybody in the audience?
you check the chat.
So it looks like we do not have anyone who will be addressing the board today.
Excuse me, this is Tom Lindquist. I would like to, if I might.
Oh, certainly. Mr. Lindquist, you may address the board with any matter of interest to the watershed.
Okay,
Please raise your hand, which you already did. Wait to be recognized. State your name and your address for the record. And please limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes. Additional comments may be submitted in writing. Generally, the board does not take official action on items discussed at this time, but may refer the matter to staff for a future report or direct that the matter be scheduled for a future agenda. I'll turn it over to you.
okay, should I proceed?
Yes, please.
Okay, this is Tom Lindquist. I live on the east side of Duck Lake at 16750 Baywood Terrace. I've lived there for about 39 years. And we, my neighbors and other board members of the Duck Lake Association have been following with great interest the discussions regarding water level in particular. And as we look back at data, including, I think, a graph that is shown extremely nicely in a report from the Barnes engineering people. If I can show it, I don't know if you can see this, but this really tells the story. The lake has really changed its personality since the outlet was changed in 2014, which effectively clamped it to the water level to a level about a foot lower than it has been in the past for about 4 years prior to that. So we're very interested in this resolution number 24-017, which holds out the chance of mimicking the behavior of the lake in prior years. One question I have on this is the verb mimic, and I'm wondering if that means something in addition to just getting the average water level back to where it used to be, or if there's more to it than that. I don't know if anybody can comment on that now or later, but for sure we are interested in seeing the water level return to prior values. The second issue that I'm interested in commenting on is the implementation schedule. The implementation schedule looks like this particular task order would be completed, I believe, in July of this year. And I'm concerned about the ticking clock. We've been kind of in a state where we've been waiting for a couple of years now for improvements. And I'm hoping that it would be possible to not just define the approach, but actually to make a modification to the outlet by the end of this summer, this year. If that is actually possible, then I think it would behoove us to speak to the DNR fisheries people to see if they buy in on this and would be willing to restock the lake as they used to with their prior fisheries management plan for the lake as soon as this spring. So those are my main comments. And in general, I appreciate the effort. I hope we can move ahead on this and get the lake back to where it used to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lindquist. I probably will let maybe Scott answer those during the section where we're talking about Duck Lake. Anyone else have any comments at all for the board? Looks like Maya.
Hi, I just figured out how to turn that on. Okay, I had to stop my other one, so now I can't hear you. So that's probably a problem, but I'll just quickly introduce myself. I'm Maya Santamaria. I'm the previous president of the Eden Prairie Duck Lake Association and a current board member still. Our Lake Association was founded, as you know, in September of 2022. And it was a felt need and a common need by lake residents to address the issues that seem to be compounding rather than improving on our beloved lake. Our mission is to work together with stakeholders such as yourselves to protect and enhance the water quality of the water, the aquatic environment, the fish and wild habitat of Duck Lake and its surrounding watershed. And both in February and June of 2023, full membership meetings were held where residents asked our board to do something about addressing the low water level on the lake. Those of us who have lived here for years know that the level, as Tom had expressed, it was has been lowered, and it's not conducive to our mission of protecting and enhancing the aquatic environment or the ecosystem that depends on it. So we feel that the city and the DNR have done us wrong, first by illegally putting the culvert on a lower level than it should have been, and then by denying the actual real historical levels of the water that we know our lake should be at, and are artificially being manipulated in a way that's been in a detriment to our fish and wildlife and interfering with the natural order. So we're really grateful to you tonight, the board of the Watershed District, everyone that's here tonight for listening to us, to our lake residents and our lake association for working with us. And tonight we're grateful that the tasks 1 through 5 from the order 46 for bar engineering to evaluate the outlet configurations can be voted on by your board. We feel heard. We feel like we're true stakeholders in this along with you, and then we feel that the possibility of being helped with the task of being responsible stewards of our lake is within reach, and with the support of you and your, of course, this board, hopefully we can start that process of a resolution of this issue that's so important to all of us residents. So on behalf of the entire membership of Eden Prairie Duck Lake Association and over 40 households and families who live around the lake and call it home, we urge, at least the ones that are in our association, there are actually more than that, we urge you to vote in favor of resolution number 24-017 that's up for vote today on the agenda. And we just want to let you know that we appreciate your support. We promise to be good partners in this and put some skin in the game along with you as we go through this process and to collaborate where appropriate. So thank you very much for your time and for the vote tonight.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Santamaria. I believe that concludes public interest comments. Yes. So let's proceed forward onto the presentation of the Lotus Lake Water Quality Improvement Project. Turn this over to Terry.
President Patterson, managers, I remember a couple of years back, we were looking at LL 1, 5, 7, 8, and decided that it might be best to try and see if through an economy of scale, of putting those all together, we might recognize some efficiencies. We have met several times with the City of Eden Prairie, with their Public Works Departments, their Parks Department, and then Fred Rozumowski and Jennifer Keeler, who is joining us online tonight, have begun with first the feasibility study and are ready to present on that information tonight. We are not requesting any action at this time. We're just doing this for information for the managers. We'll come back at a future meeting for a public hearing and a request to order the project.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well,
Go ahead,
do you want me
Jennifer.
to? Okay. Well, thank you, managers. Thanks for having me. As Terry mentioned, I'm here to just kind of talk about the summary of the feasibility study that was completed for the Lotus Lake Water Quality Improvement Project. And this is a brief presentation, so I'm sure you all have had a chance to maybe flip through the report. For the sake of time, we're trying to keep it simple and straightforward. So I'm going to just cover a little bit of background about, how we got to where we are in the feasibility study, talk about the various things that were looked into and the recommendations stemming from the study, and talking about kind of how we move forward from here. So at a high level, Lotus Lake is in the upper portion of the Purgatory Creek watershed. You can see the watershed area here. There are 5 different project areas within the watershed that we'll be focusing on. I'm not going to talk about them super in detail right at this moment, but you can see them scattered throughout the watershed. These were areas historically identified in past studies. As Terry mentioned, we also through this process have been coordinating with the City of Chanhassen. And so some of the things that you'll see also within this watershed, these areas that show up in sort of a light gray whitish line, are areas within the watershed where the city has upcoming street reconstruction projects in the next couple of years. So that includes Pleasant View Road, the Fox Hollow Drive neighborhood here, as well as Frontier Trail. With regards to water quality, Lotus Lake is an impaired water body. It's impaired for nutrients. And as part of the TMDL, it had identified both internal load being an issue for the lake as well as external watershed loads. And the TMDL had established a reduction of 50 pounds per year of phosphorus from the City of Chanhassen for the watershed loading. It had also identified significant internal load reductions as well as reductions in erosion sources within the watershed. So right now, one application of alum was completed within the lake, and there's still a second alum application that's needed to achieve the appropriate dosing. That's intended to reach those internal loads, but there's still the need then to address that external watershed load. And all of the project areas that we've been looking at have been included in the watershed's current watershed management plan. As we went through this process, we looked at a variety of data that was available within the watershed to help understand the issues a little bit better. And one of the areas that the watershed had been monitoring were 2 monitoring stations downstream of, both within Meadow Green Park, one just east of Kerber Boulevard, and then a second just downstream of a pedestrian trail between Bighorn Drive and Big Woods Boulevard. One of the things that we noticed when we were looking at that monitoring data was that we were seeing very high levels of TP concentrations, higher than you would expect for treated stormwater. And one of the things we also noticed about that data was that a lot of that phosphorus was associated with the particulate fraction of phosphorus. So not the dissolved portion of phosphorus. And so this was sort of surprising to us. And then the suspended sediment concentrations also suggested that there was a lot of particulate movement through this part of the system into Lotus Lake. One of the things that was documented by district staff, as you can see in the photo in the upper part, is that there's a lot of sediment that's accumulated in this channel downstream of Meadow Green Park. So if you see on the map in the figure where you see that LL_3, there's a channel downstream of that existing pond, and there's been some sediment that's accumulated in that channel, likely the result of a failure in that pond a number of years ago. The city has since rectified the pond itself and has done a project there and improved the outlet from that, but there's still quite a bit of accumulated sediment that's in that channel to the west of Kerber Boulevard, and that's slowly working its way downstream through the system. So that was one piece of information that was interesting as we looked at the data that was available in the Lotus Lake watershed. Additionally, back in 2020, we completed a feasibility study for Kerber Pond Ravine. And this was another project area that we did wrap into this study as well to look at Lotus Lake projects as a whole. And one of the things that was driving that was the city of Chanhassen had provided documentation of runoff leaving this ravine downstream of Kerber Pond, at the outlet at the crossing at Frontier Boulevard. And what they showed was really almost like a chocolate milk looking runoff. So you can see all that mud that's accumulated in that photo on the right. So there is sediment that's mobilizing from these ravines on the west side of Lotus Lake as they're moving towards the lake. So taking into account all the information that we had in the watershed, we also performed some site visits, and as Terry mentioned, met with city staff. We took a look at the different project areas. And what we did, and I'm going to go over this at a really high level, and we're not going to bog down in the details of each of these locations, but what we did was we utilized the district's H&H model, so your hydrologic and hydraulic model, to get a good understanding of the existing conditions at each of our project locations. And that included looking at peak flood elevation, peak flows, and then in areas where we were looking at these different drainages and channels, looking at peak velocities and shears. So these are the parameters that we often look at when we're thinking about erosive forces in ravines and channels. We also went through the process of doing water quality modeling for existing conditions, as well as for the development of a variety of different types of BMPs we could implement in these areas. And so we were looking at pollutant load reductions. As we were thinking through the various alternatives for each of these project areas, we were also thinking about what are the opportunities for restoration and improvements to soil health within the project footprints. And then as we thought through these concepts, we also developed planning level costs. So that included both engineering, design, construction, and then oversight and administration during construction. And came up with also cost benefit. So, what is the effectiveness of each of these BMPs as it relates to essentially the cost per pound of pollutant removed. We also tried to utilize your CIP prioritization scoring system, looking at each of the different alternatives we had considered for each of the 4 sites, and tried to assign that CIP prioritization score. So that's what you see in this plot here. So what you'll see is that, for each of these different project areas, there was a number of different types of BMPs that were considered. And based on how they performed and what we could expect for restoration, you can see that they all have different scores as it relates to your scoring criteria. Typically, a score above 30 is a project that the watershed would often consider funding or incorporating into their CIP program. So you can see that there are options at each of these locations that exceed that threshold of 30 for scoring. And then, as I mentioned, through this process, we've been coordinating with the city on their upcoming road reconstruction projects around each of these project areas. So in a nutshell, we did that for each of the sites, identified a variety of BMPs, evaluated it, and went through this process of deciding, what are the recommended projects for each of these locations based on what we expected for performance and how they could be coordinated with the city and their opportunities for restoration and other benefits. So at North Lotus Lake Park here, we have identified a concept that essentially will restore a large portion of the area that is currently fairly unused turf into a stormwater park, essentially, with a lot of native restoration and habitat. Over in Meadow Green Park, as I mentioned previously, the city of Chanhassen had already completed a pond improvement project in the park, but what we'd be looking to do is stabilizing the channel to the east of Kerber Boulevard, where we were seeing a lot of that sediment being mobilized and moving through the system. At the lower wetland in Meadow Green Park, we're looking at doing some storm sewer diversion and enhanced filtration of discharges from this system. We've identified a concept that'll restore Kerber Pond Ravine to help stabilize and prevent erosion in that system and the sediment that's been observed to be moving towards Lotus Lake. And then off Frontier Trail, we've also identified an infiltration basin that would be located on an outlot from the Frontier Trail Association. So there are 5 different projects that have been identified and evaluated and recommended as part of this study. So for each of these, so in this table, at a high level, this is a summary of the recommended BMPs. You can see there's the opinion of probable cost for each of these projects. Again, this is, a point opinion of cost. This is based on kind of conceptual design level. So you'll see that range of uncertainty, which is typical for this level of design. You can see the estimated annual TP removals for the various projects. The first line item has actually already been implemented by the city. And so that project is already achieving an additional 8 pounds of phosphorus removal from existing conditions. Then you can look at and see the estimated phosphorus removals for all the other watershed BMPs that are recommended. And I think the important takeaway here is that the combined total annual phosphorus removal for all the recommended BMPs in the Lotus Lake watershed is around 58 to 60 pounds per year. And the targeted load reduction between the watershed load reductions and the erosion sources was about 56 pounds per year. So with the implementation of these projects in the watershed, it could be estimated that you would achieve that load reduction required by the Lotus Lake TMDL. Also included in this table just are the annual TSS removal, so that suspended sediment removal for each of these BMPs, the estimated restoration area, so area that we would be restoring with native plantings and communities. You can see that restored area, and then the CIP scoring, going through that scoring process. So I'm only going to talk about one of the BMP sites for the sake of time tonight. This is just a conceptual drawing of what this could look like at the North Lotus Lake Stormwater Park alternative. So we met with city staff in this area, and currently the existing condition in this park space really is just turf. It's turf. There's a walking trail that skirts the edge of it, but it's a highly, I would say, underutilized part of the park. There's programming at the ball fields and at the playground and the hockey rink, but the rest of the park is an unused space. And there was a lot of opportunity that we had identified for not only being able to better manage stormwater, hopefully through infiltration. Preliminary testing suggests that infiltration may be possible here, but we'll have to confirm that with actual geotechnical borings. But the intent here is that, we're going to be able to not only hopefully do some volume control and pollutant removal, we're going to be reducing rates of discharge to the wetland downstream and ultimately Lotus Lake. And there's this opportunity to provide significant restoration within the park area, opportunities to enhance recreation and education. There's an opportunity really to tell an amazing story. I think the other piece that's unique about this site is that we're able to actually help address some flooding issues in the neighborhood to the east. So you can see this small little wetland. Can you see my pointers? I'm not sure if everyone can see my pointer. So you can see the small wetland here. As part of the modeling that the district had completed a number of years ago, there was a number of homes around this wetland and in this neighborhood that were potentially at risk of flooding. And as part of this concept with the reconstruction of the roadways in this neighborhood, there is the potential to divert some of the storm sewer away from that wetland and into this new system. And so what that does is it provides not only some flood risk reduction in the neighborhood to the east, but it's also improving the performance of that wetland from a water quality standpoint, because right now there's too much water going to that wetland. So this is a great example of a concept where working with the city, you're able to achieve multiple benefits and really kind of showcase what can be done with stormwater management in the watershed. So with regards to next steps, there's a work plan that's laid out in the report in much more detail than is shown here, but we've tried to break it down into the major tasks, including, engineering, design, and permitting, acquisition of any agreements or easements that might be needed, bidding and award, implementation of construction, and then kind of the long-term monitoring and maintenance. So you can see the years listed. A lot of what's driving the schedule on this work plan is really the potential to coordinate with the city street reconstruction projects, which are under design or will be under design soon and underway soon. And so there's coordination that would be needed between both the city and the watershed to integrate it into those kind of designs of those BMPs and to make sure we're working through that. So with regards to schedule, we're in Q1 of 2024. So that's that first column in this schedule. But what you can see is we'd be having a public hearing and ordering the project potentially sometime in Q2 of this year. And then we'd be moving through the design project. And that would include data collection, as well as the engineering and design and permitting and acquisition of agreements, with the intent of construction beginning in late 2025 and into 2026. So with that, that is a really high-level overview of what's been going on in the Lotus Lake watershed with regards to the feasibility study. And with that, I'm going to open it up to any questions.
Thank you, Jennifer.
I have a question.
Sure.
That's okay. So one of the concerns I have is it sounds great, but when we did the alum treatment, it wasn't as effective as we thought. And at least one of the theories is the wake boats churning up the shoreline and the bottom. Is there anything that can be done to reduce the the phosphorus coming back out of the
Resuspension.
resuspension of the phosphorus? Thank you.
President Pedersen, Manager Ziegler, while that alum treatment wasn't effective as perhaps it was on Lake Riley, it was still a very effective treatment. We saw 40 to 60% reduction in TP within that lake. What we were seeing is in some of the shallow areas that we're still seeing a significant release rate of phosphorus from those soil substrates. So we'll be coming, we're going to have Joe, I think next month, Joe Bischoff talk to you about that about the second alum treatment and how he's going to tweak the areas to try and accommodate those other areas. So the short answer is yes, there are other things that we're looking at to do to make sure that the alum treatment is more effective.
Thank you. That's all I have.
President Pedersen.
Andrew Grafton.
Thank you. So one of the things before you do an alum treatment, you got to be sure you stop the loading. So I'm just trying to get a handle on, it sounds like there's still loading going into that, or are we saying that it's only the internal suspension that's the issue here?
President Penderson, Manager Crafton, both the UAA and the TMDL demonstrated that on their own, neither can achieve the load reduction that we need. So we have started the internal load reduction, but yes, you're right. We need to move into the watershed and address the external load reduction. The areas that are identified both through the Kerber Pond area as well as the North Lotus Lake are the two largest loading watersheds to Lotus Lake. So we believe with this and the alum, I think I looked at the numbers, we're about 10 or 11 pounds shy of where we need to be, but it gets us really close to where we want to be.
Thanks.
Madam President.
Yes, Manager Cook.
Well, just so everybody knows, I've been living on Lotus Lake for, I guess it's 34 years this year. So you can obviously take whatever I say with whatever grain of salt you want to throw on it. So, but in interest of full disclosure, this has been a way long time coming. In my view, way too long. I do realize the complications that have arisen because of the city, why it hasn't addressed Frontier Trail before now. That's a question of the past. I'm hopeful. I hope you're right that we're going to address it. I have several concerns here. But first of all, I'll work backwards a little bit to address Manager Crafton's statement. I believe that there was a significant discussion about, treating outside, phosphorus versus internal loads. And I specifically recall a presentation by Mr. Bischoff a number of years ago when we first started talking about alum treatments. And my recollection is that the conclusion was that the alum treatments were worth it because the rate of that the most significant issue was internal loading in most of these lakes, that the external loading was less of a factor, and that I believe it was stated that in their opinion, in the opinion of Mr. Bischoff, and I think he was with a different firm at the time, that there wouldn't be a significant adverse impact on doing alum treatments if the external treatments were delayed for some time. Now, this is getting to be many years, so you raise a valid concern, Manager Crafton. I have that concern too. So, but, I'm just reciting my recollection of what I thought Mr. Bischoff had stated. But I think delaying this any much longer, you do run that risk of, have we wasted some of our money with alum treatments if we're just continually dumping pounds in there. Moving backwards, I don't have I don't know if you have a immediate map of the Kerber Ravine issue, but my recollection is the Kerber Ravine, that part that goes down there, it's not only the upper section, but also the lower sections that are issued. So I don't, can you tell me, are they going to be addressing that entire stream as part of this project? Because I believe it all needs work from the outlet of the pond all the way down to where it runs into the lake. So it's that what is anticipated in this project?
President Pedersen, managers, yes, we've been looking at the length of the corridor. There are certain areas that are obviously worse off than others. I'll let Jennifer Keeler speak to that more specifically. And then once you get to Frontier Trail, it's a very unique outlet system, we'll just say. They have two outflows going to the lake. It goes into I'll call it a surge basin just because I don't have another word for it. The city themselves are going to undertake repairing the hydraulics of that system from Frontier Trail down to the lake. And John, Ms. Keeler, if you want to speak specifically to where within that channel we're looking at our improvements, or if you have that even, I know we've only looked at it conceptually at this point.
Yes, to answer that question, we are looking at the entire length of the ravine. I don't have the detailed map, but it is in the report of the concept that came from the 2020 report feasibility study. But the intent is to stabilize the portions of the ravine where in the upper part of the ravine where there's erosion occurring, but there's also some small areas of head cutting. So it's intended to stabilize along there as well as in the lower parts of the ravine. There's also a couple side channels coming into the ravine where there's erosion that's been observed. And so there's also the potential to improve drainage into the ravine to help further stabilize that system.
Well, thank you. I think that definitely needs to be, considered on that basis. One item, I'm kind of working up that west side there a little bit. 2, 3 houses from where I'm at, there is a small, creek, whatever you want to call it. There was a significant pond put in just off of Kerber Boulevard. I don't know exactly when. I think it was post 1990 in that area, but I don't know if that's been looked at or evaluated. I can tell you that, I think there's a lot of, what's the right word? Siltation or deltaing at the end of that little ravine as it goes into, the lake. And if it hasn't been looked at, I suggest that be looked at as some means of perhaps slowing down that water. The drop from Kerber Boulevard to the lake is significant. All that west side, the drop, from the high points to the low points are significant. So I do think that ravine that's, north of where, I reside, definitely needs some looking at on that basis. I'm not as familiar with going further north. I know that I believe we approved permits for 3 houses up toward the west northwest side, and there's significant retention, I think tanks, etc., to try to control runoff there. But I wasn't aware, I'll say this, I wasn't aware that the park area was that significant of an issue, and if it is, I'm glad it's being addressed. But as we move down the east side, my recollection is there's a number of stormwater ponds. And my recollection also is that there was discussion that those ponds were at least in heavy rainfall, ending up contributing significant, pollutants, into the lake. And I don't know the status of, it's a part of this, are they being looked at to clean them out, refurbish them? I understand they've been around ever since that east side was developed. So I think that's something that should also be looked at if we're looking at trying to minimize the external pollutant flow into there. And then the last thing that I will mention is that as Manager Ziegler mentioned, I'm convinced, and I think that the data shows it in our recent experience with phosphorus levels in the shallow areas demonstrates that these wake boats are having an adverse impact on the water quality. In fact, I believe that there was a release that even the wake boat industry has acknowledged the adverse impact on lake bottoms. And if you don't have that, I can forward that to you. So I end with that because I believe I know people have thought that maybe we as a district don't have the ability to regulate water, but I believe we do, or activities on water, especially when it has an adverse impact on lake bottoms and lake shores. And anybody who has witnessed these wake boats can attest to the adverse effect that these boats have on lake bottoms and lake shores. Now, thankfully, we have had a very low, past 2 years, we've had very low lake levels. So that generally these wakes have not reached, probably the top of the shores. But if we get another wet year, like we had, 4 or 5 years ago, we're going to have that issue. So I thank Manager Ziegler for raising that, and I think we need to address it. And I think we have the legal authority to address it on these, especially a lake like this narrow type of lake. And then I do have a question. How does the size of Lotus Lake compare to the other lakes in our district?
Oh, President Patterson, managers, you caught me off guard. It is in the middle of it. It's smaller than Riley, larger and smaller than Starring. But I don't have the acreage offhand. I can certainly get that. It's on our lake fact sheets.
But is it accurate to say it's probably narrower than any of the two that you've mentioned?
Yes, yes,
Significantly narrower, correct?
yes, yep.
And that's really the key issue in my mind, at least with the wake boats, is the fact that the lake isn't wide enough to allow these wakes to dissipate their energy before they reach the shore. And the only way they slow down, it's been proven, it's like a tsunami. The only way they slow down is by rubbing up against the bottom of the lake. And I've noticed, anecdotally, after the wake boats go during the day, the suspended materials is incredible. I mean, you end up with going from clear water in the morning to pea soup in the afternoon. I mean, literally pea soup. I have video of it, on that basis. And, that doesn't return generally until the next day. And I also have video of how the impact on the shoreline, at least when we have the high water. So I think we definitely need to look at that as a contributing factor. And the last thing I mentioned is, if I'm correct, it was noted by staff that there was the increase in phosphorus levels in the shallow areas last year, and I believe the year before, which I think everybody was surprised that would happen, given that we had done the alum treatments. So with that, I wonder if we can't have a workshop with a little more detailed discussion or answers to, this is a great short presentation, but the plan has a lot more into it. I'd like to understand more what is entailed in each one of those BMPs. So I yield. Thank you.
Thank you, Manager Cook.
President Patterson, managers, there was one thing I'd like to respond to. Ms. Keeler, could you go back to the overall map showing the 4 different areas? Thank you. So LL8 down in the southwest part of Lotus Lake there off of Frontier Trail, there are 2 smaller ponds that are across Frontier Trail and further north. Yeah, her cursor's on them right now. The city did clean out one of those ponds. We evaluated if there was any benefit to be gotten out of modifying them, given their location on the private property, limited space to actually increase those ponds. We did not find any benefit to it. So that's why we looked across the street for an additional BMP. There is another pond, and I believe it's the one Mr. Manager Cook is referring to, which is north of City Center Park, which is and just southwest of Chanhassen Park Pond, which is Curve Pond. And that I would say is almost worthless pond. They excavated within a wetland. So I don't know that it serves much value. And then they did modify the outlet on the Meadow Green Park Pond to, and Engineer Sobiek could speak better than I can, but to improve the hydraulics and the water quality performance of that pond. So we have evaluated the ponds that are readily accessible and found them to be lacking but limited in what we can do to improve them.
Thank you. Manager Duval, do you have any questions or comments?
I do, thank you. Just a couple of comments. So I think on one of the slides showed the work plan going out to 2030. I think it was early on. So the question is, this fits in the the original 10-year plan, I presume. And I think, Scott, with your schedule here, there's a couple items down in the bottom marked Lotus Lake. Are those part of what has been discussed here? Do you know? And they look like they're at the early stages in terms of the analysis.
President Pedersen, Manager Duvall. Yes, in terms of the summary that is provided with the engineer's report most months or quarterly, we do try to include all the projects that are part of the CIP, the district CIP on there. And you mentioned that these projects in particular that we're talking about here are in the very, very early stages of that process.
But on the timeline that she put up, it showed that the work plan would go out to 2030, I believe. So we're 4 years away from that. So does that still fit within that window? And I guess a kind of an additional comment is how dependent on the city of Chanhassen is doing all this work. There was some mention about they were doing some things, they were helping and dragging and.
President Pedersen, Manager Duvall. In terms of the scheduling of the project, the current 10-year plan goes to 2028.
28.
These are programmed to go out to 2030 because of the extended vegetation management after construction.
Okay.
So primary construction would be completed hopefully by the end of 26. And then we're looking at vegetation management going on after that.
Okay, and that's in our current detailed plan.
President Pedersen, to Manager DeVel's other question, how dependent are we on Chanhassen? Very dependent on them for North Lotus Lake Park. It does not happen without partnership with the city of Chanhassen. Some of the other smaller, lower hanging fruit projects we could certainly do with just minor assistance from Chanhassen and requests for maintenance from them. There are other parts where we know that they have road projects coming up. Perhaps it's easier for us to not include it with our overall plan, just say, here is the design, go do it when you do the road project and have them incorporated into it. So that's all in that first part of permitting and private land access agreement and city cooperative agreement that would be working through all of that. The infiltration basin that's shown in LL8 is on private property. It's on the Frontier Trail Association. So we would have to get permission from that association to do some work in there.
Thank you.
I just have one comment, and once again, I'm very happy to see that we're working with one of our cities in order to be able to accomplish more. And it makes me feel very optimistic in the future that where we have money going is going to be utilized and put to a much greater effect, because we are in fact working with a team rather than on our own. So that's my only comment. Okay, thank you very much.
Madam President?
Yes.
I just asked a question. Are we going to schedule a follow-up on this?
President Pedersen, Manager Cook, managers, yes, we will be having, we'll be bringing more detailed plans back to you. We will be having to hold a public hearing. So yes, there will be at least 2 or 3 more opportunities to be looking at the plans and speaking to them.
Okay, thank you. I really would, again, you mentioned, again, there's that small ravine, north of where, I'm at, which, they have the big pond further up. This is all because of elevation changes, right? I mean, we have significant elevation changes on the west side. Also, that city park to the north has got an elevation issue because we come off of somewhat of a plateau going down. So, my understanding here is that we're really dealing with some significant elevation drops, which I think precipitate, the erosion that we have. So, and then my understanding though is somewhere on the east side, there were ponds. There were drainage ponds that were not, well, some people thought they weren't very effective, had a lot of algae growth. So could you look into that and come back to us or fill in the information? Maybe I have a misunderstanding.
Oh,
So
President,
that's just an ask that I have.
yeah, President Pedersen, Manager Cook, I know the ponds you're talking about, they're inside of a, I won't call it a roundabout, but it's an eyebrow that's built out. I forget the name of the street, and yes, it's a fairly poor performing pond. Again, it was built right at the beginning of the whole NERP phase where they just said, well, just put a pond in. And there really wasn't much for sizing and modeling and making it be appropriate for the spot. So yes, I know the pond you're speaking of. I can look into that and get you more information if they have it.
Thank you. I'm finished.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentation. I believe we're on to item 5, which is reading and approval of the minutes, starting with the December 6th special meeting. Does anybody have a motion for me to approve?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes as written.
I'll second. I do have a comment.
Thank you. All right. Let's hear what comments are.
Page 3, line 50. There's just a word that needs to be knocked out. Manager Cook said he has concerns about that by agreeing to this, the bond, to the bond. I think we just need to get rid of the. Otherwise, everything's good.
Any other
Manager
changes?
Crafton, can you speak up, please? We're having trouble
sorry.
hearing you over here.
It's just,
Like,
just yell. Okay, page 3, line 50. 3 words from the end of that sentence, but there's a the that's not needed.
thank you.
Any other changes? Hearing none. Mr. Smith, could you please do a roll call for us?
On approval of the December 6 minutes, Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
No,
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
Next, we're on to the December 26th minutes. Do I hear a motion to accept the minutes?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as written. I'll second it.
Thank you. Any comments, any changes? Hearing none. May we have a roll call vote, Mr. Smith?
On approval of December 26 minutes, Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
no,
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
And on to the minutes of the January 10th meeting. Do I have a motion?
I move to accept the January 25th minutes.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion. I also have a comment though.
Super.
So my comment is on line 138. I'm pretty sure I said something to this effect, including the BMP and alum treatments on the timeline would help show the cause and effect of the BMPs and alum treatments on the water quality. So this was in reference to our annual report. And it seems like, one of our goals obviously is to improve the water quality. And we don't really make a good case. We show it's getting better, but we don't tie our work to the water getting better.
Ah.
So if we can just add that. I sent an email to Terry, so you have that. Yeah.
Any other changes for these minutes?
Yeah, page 7,
Are ready?
line 202. She said it would be nice, it should be if the district instead of it. Can you hear that?
Any other changes? Hearing none. Mr. Smith, our vote, please.
To be clear, these are the minutes of what date?
January 10th.
If I-
I
No,
believe that
25th.
discussion has been
I
January
thought
25th.
we had already approved the 26th minutes.
Yeah.
Am I
No, that
wrong
was the
about that?
10th.
The 26th.
Yeah, December 6th, January 10th, and January 25th should have been our.
Oh, 25th. It's on, the original here says the 10th. Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Okay.
so,
Manager Kraft?
Madam President,
Yes.
clarification, please. So can you tell me what we're voting on?
We're voting on approving the minutes for the January 25th meeting. The original agenda I
Okay.
had from last week had it as the 10th. That's
No problem.
where the
Thank you.
issue is.
Thank you.
There are 10th minutes as well, January 10th minutes.
We already
Didn't we approve
voted.
those?
We already approved.
Okay. I think you guys called them the December 26th minutes.
Oh, is that what they are?
No, they're the January 10th, but when the motion was made, it was for the December 26th, which
Oh.
that's what threw me for a loop because we approved those at the last meeting. So I think we're out of order. We've got the 25th right now that we are
Voting on.
voting on.
Thank you.
And we'll have to go back to the 10th.
Okay.
Clarify that as the 10th.
Very- Very good. On approving the minutes of January 25th,
Mhm.
Manager Crafton,
With amendments, yes.
thank you. Manager DeVal,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. Now, for the record, we'll note that the vote previously taken on approval of December 26 minutes was unnecessary because they were previously approved.
That is correct.
And so now what would be before the board would be the minutes of January 10th.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion to approve January 10th minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the January 10th meeting minutes.
A second,
Thank you. Any changes? Hearing none. Mr. Smith, could you please take a roll call?
On approval of the January 10th minutes, Manager Crafton,
yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
No.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
That brings us to item number 6, which is our committee reports. I believe we have Jeff here from the Citizens Advisory Committee. Would you like to join us, Jeff?
I'm waiting for it to go solid green. There it went. All right. Should be live.
Testing.
Yeah,
All right.
it's for the audience at home.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam President and managers. My name is Jeff Weiss. I'm representing the CAC this evening. I believe you have a copy of the draft minutes in your meeting packet. I'm going to follow that those draft minutes just to kind of keep me on track, make sure I don't forget things. We held our CAC meeting in January on January 22nd. That would be, typically we meet on the third Monday of each month, but we moved it back a week because the third Monday of January fell on Martin Luther King Day. So we moved it back to avoid a holiday for Watershed District staff. At the meeting, we welcomed a new member. Andrew Peterson joined us, who the board appointed to the CAC at the January meeting. So it was nice having a new person on board. One other thing I will note, as you look at if you look at those minutes, there are fewer people listed on the members there because the day of the meeting, there were a couple of resignations that came forward. I bring this up just to acknowledge that there are fewer people there. We did not discuss it or take action on it. But during the meeting, we had a great learning presentation. Staff member Matt McClay discussed the regulatory program and all the effort that goes into the permitting program, and ended up being just a really, really good discussion from everybody on board. Everybody was there. Everybody comes, as you all know, a lot of you have been on the CFP or attended meeting. Everybody comes from different backgrounds and different levels of technical expertise, but almost, I wasn't keeping score, but almost everybody had questions, and it was just a really, really good discussion conversation that we got out of it. And it worked out great that it was the first meeting for our new member because it really helped him understand what's going on with the watershed and understanding. Because a lot of the controversial things that come up and that we discuss at the CAC have to do with projects that come before the board, and it helps us understand all those different things that the board has to deal with as you're dealing with permit applications. So anyway, we ended up talking about this for quite a long time. We we talked about the regulatory program longer than what we had budgeted for on schedule, but it was such a good discussion. I don't think anybody cared that we were kind of running over time. So anyway, that, like I said, that took up a good chunk of time. Then we moved into our board meeting recap and discussion. Sharon McCotter was here at the January meeting, and she gave a summary of items that you all talked about at the January meeting. One thing that also prompted some additional discussion was, the news that Riley Lake and Reichmark Lake are near to being delisted. She kind of gave a summary that the thresholds for delisting weren't quite met before this last round of impaired waters came out, but it was exciting, and everyone was very, very excited about that those lakes are both near to being delisted and hopefully be delisted next time the impaired waters list comes out. We also talked a little bit about the lake management plan template, which is something that she reported on last month as well, and that's something else that we continue to be excited and interested at the CAC about, just finding those efficiencies for utilizing templates to come up with a lake management plan across the district. Next on the agenda item here, it's listed that there was not any CAC recommendations from the board, so we did not take any action on items that came from the board of managers, and likewise, we did not have a new advisory for bringing that to the board. We had a few program updates, but at this point, our discussion we were running a little bit out of time, so we were kind of going over some things fast. Lastly, one of the last orders of business we had was we elected new officers for the CAC. Andrew Aller was re-elected as chair for the CAC again. We have a new vice chair, Bonnie Nelson is a new vice chair, and then our newest member, Andrew Peterson, was elected as a reporter for the CAC. We also acknowledge that we have some other subcommittees or other kind of interests and ideas. We need some new identified leadership for those roles, but we're kind of running out of time to really give that enough attention at this past meeting. Our next CAC meeting is scheduled for February 26th. This is another one that is going to be pushed back a week to avoid a conflict with the paid holiday for district staff. So we have all generally scheduled around Monday nights, so it's easier for us to bump it back a week and to move to a different night. So that is, I think, it from my update for you all. I will be happy to have any questions or answer any questions you may have.
I'd just like to add a couple comments. Staff, Nick Late, I thought that presentation on the permitting program was fabulous, as you mentioned. I mean, it was the dialogue was engagement was really informative, and really got into, again, how the whole system kind of works. And Matt did an excellent job in doing it. I don't know that he necessarily does this every day, but he did a great job. And I guess on that same note, it seems like, and I know the staff is busy with lots of things, but if we could periodically have something like that done, even at these meetings, I think it would be informative, both for ourselves, because things change all the time, but for anybody else that's around. So I think the CAC is a great format to test it out. And if it's something that seems like it really engages, that maybe we bring it back to a monthly meeting periodically. And secondly, I think the delisting of the lakes, I noticed it's made the local news. So just to make sure that at the time when looks like we're going to have a delisting, that we make it known that we were part of the major effort to make that happen with the local news and even the state news. So I think it'd be really important, again, to get our connection out with that.
Any other comments or questions from any of the other managers?
Madam Chair, Madam President.
I recognize Manager Crafton.
Oh, sorry.
No, I forgot what I was going to ask, so go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Manager.
Several things. One, I'd mentioned to the regarding CAC meetings, and although you didn't have a action item or request for the board, there was a discussion and a suggestion that the CAC track its request to the board and that they follow up with the board. And I'm wondering if the CAC is going to be doing that going forward for this year. You know, I would recommend doing that. I mean, you don't have to answer me now, but I suggest you do that. Secondly, you raised a nice issue. I don't know if we had done a press release regarding the delisting or not. I didn't see it, but if we did, great. If we didn't, we should keep those in mind going forward. And then having to do specifically again with the CAC and with these presentations, we've had discussion before about recording these presentations so that if we don't have a chance to bring it back to the Board of Managers, at least we have a recording that we could view, you know, at our leisure to have the discussions. But these may be good things for having more of the workshops that was suggested when we set up this our schedule of meetings. As I said, you know, it's a lot easier in my mind to have had you know, a schedule of one of these workshops every month. We can always cancel it. It's a lot easier to cancel something than go through the hassle of notices and scheduling a meeting, especially if we want to, if we believe in complying with section 103D. So that ends my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Manager Cook.
Okay.
Manager Crafton.
My question was Matt's presentation recorded?
Yeah, there it is.
Pedersen managers, no, it was not recorded.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Weiss. We appreciate you coming.
Pedersen matters, but I could sure make him come present it to you guys.
Sounds like a very good idea.
President, do we have a representative for the next CAC meeting?
Looks like we're looking for a representative for the next CAC meeting. Has somebody volunteered to do that yet?
When is it?
It is February 26th.
Well, Madam Chair.
I'll do it if David doesn't want to.
Well, it's in the evening. I
Yes.
guess my conflict is in the morning, so I could do it.
Okay. So appears that David has volunteered to be our representative at the CAC meeting on February 26th.
What time is that? It's here.
It's at 6 p.m. usually.
There you go. Thank you. Okay, the only other committee report is the Personnel Committee. We had, as the report stated, a couple of minor changes we made to the employee handbook. The performance review for the district administrator is due next month. I sent an email this morning to Lewis with all of the forms, all the information you'll need. I'm asking that all of that information is sent back to me by the end of February. And we've also asked that some sort of a survey goes out on a date that we could actually do the review. And so you should be looking in your inbox for the potential dates that we could come up with to do the review. And then finally, we talked about perhaps doing a compensation survey with maybe the addition of benefits with other people within the metro watershed districts. I did reach out to a couple of human resource firms. Gallagher has responded back to me again, and they are putting a proposal together for us to find out if we did it on our own, what it would run, if we did it in conjunction with some of the other watershed districts. So once I get that back, then I will contact the 2 watershed districts that expressed interest in maybe doing it with us, and we will bring something back to you once we have something a little bit firmer. Does anybody have any other questions about the Personnel Committee report?
Madam President.
Yes.
Well, I have a number of comments regarding the committee report. But I'll take the last issue first, since it's freshest in my mind. I assume you're going to go back to Metro watersheds and see if they want to participate before we decide to go on our own. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
I'll continue. I noticed the first item was the earned sick and safe leave statute. I feel it imperative to state that, it's been known for a long time that that statute is going into effect in January. And perhaps our policy is compliant, but I want to see something from appropriate employment law. Also, I know there's other requirements in that law and want to know whether or not we're complying with that law. But we shouldn't be here in February discussing about that. Related to that, you mentioned about making changes to the handbook. I don't believe that either anybody on staff or the personnel committee is authorized to make any changes to personnel handbook or our policies. And as a result, that should all be brought to the board for the board's action. With respect to item number 2 on the report, I want to know what is meant by Mr. Jeffrey's request of input. Each manager be kept separate due to the current lawsuit. I'll just state that, Mr. Jeffrey's review is Mr. Jeffrey's review, and it's to be conducted by the Board of Managers. And I don't know a reason why these would be kept separate, especially under Minnesota Government Data Practices Act. And I am not aware of any exception. And if there is an exception, then I would expect to see the basis for that exception in writing from legal counsel. And then on item number 3, which is the last item, are you going to have quarterly meetings or not? Are they going to be posted, et cetera? So I'd like to know. And then finally, are your meetings going to be recorded, whether it be audio or audio visual? And that's it. So.
Okay, so Mr. Smith, would you like to address the issue of how the district administrator's review would incorporate all of the comments? I believe that we had a discussion about that after the meeting.
Yes, I think our advice is that you continue to go through the same process you've always gone through.
Right, and that's what our plan is at this point. The district administrator, as always, has the right to respond to the review after it's been given, and that would be placed in his personnel file.
Yeah.
And that's always been that way, so that's not any different. In terms of the statute, whether or not we're compliant with the changes to ESST, I believe it is. Tell me, District Administrator Jeffrey actually looked at all of this before we made any change whatsoever. Would you like to respond to that?
President Pedersen, managers, I will actually defer to Mr. Smith, who reached out to, I'm blanking on her name now, the employment attorney that spoke at the Minnesota Watersheds annual convention, which said that we're under 50 employees.
Madam President,
That's
I
FMLA.
think Mr.
Yep.
Jeffrey's referring to the Family Medical Leave Act. We have been involved in reviewing handbooks in relation to earned sick and safe leave. I think I had shared some of that information,
Yep.
which has probably been addressed, but we can certainly work together to double check to make sure all is in order.
President Pedersen, managers, I guess, that's what I'd like to also speak to. The document that I presented to you did come from Mr. Smith Partners.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, Madam President,
Yes.
Well, just to respond again, I'm expecting that we get something in writing from legal counsel that we're in compliance, all due respect to Administrator Jeffries. You know, again, he's not a lawyer. I want to make sure that it happens. I believe he's confused with the requirements for coverage under various acts, and my understanding is ESST statute has a different number of employee coverage than the FMLA requirements. So I think it would be important for legal counsel to give us the straight scoop so we know and staff knows these are the rules. This is what we have to do for each one of these laws. It's very important that these be covered. There's a number of requirements for this law. So with that, I will yield.
Okay, so I would like to have a motion to adopt the committee reports. Anybody willing to do that?
I'd like to make a motion to accept the committee reports.
I'll second.
Thank you. And that is resolution 2024-012. Any further comments, questions?
Madam President?
Yes.
Well, I'm a little confused, so I move to amend the motion to specifically adopt the resolution 23-012.
That was the motion, right?
Thank you. That was the motion. Thank you.
Roll call.
A roll call, please.
On resolution 2312, Madam Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
One moment. Yes.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
It brings us to item number 7, which is the consent agenda. From what I've seen, it is actually items A, C, E, and H. Do I hear a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to, what's the motion number?
It is 24-013 to approve the consent agenda.
I'd like to make that motion.
Thank you.
I didn't print out the notes.
Second.
All right. Thank you, Manager Duval. Any other questions, comments?
Yes. Yes. Madam President, I'm sorry, I keep getting confused on that. I'm sorry. I'm going to ask to remove task order 46 regarding the Duck Lake outlet. For whatever reason, that didn't show up on my list.
That's not on the consent agenda. That's underneath new business.
Okay, very good. That's why I was confused. Thank you.
Okay. How about a roll call, please, Mr. Smith?
On resolution 2413, approval of the consent agenda, Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
It brings us to item 8, new business, which are items that are removed from the consent agenda. The first being to receive the January staff report. You removed this, Manager Cook?
I did. Thank you. If I can proceed.
Certainly.
Thank you. My first question is accounting, audit, and budget. And I've highlighted the area that says that there's a review of the adopted budget to provide clear illustration of committed funds relative to funds in reserve. And that it appears that you intend to take this to the Audit and Finance Committee. Are you proposing something different than what we have or have had as part of the audit and the budget function when we go through it?
President Pedersen, Manager Cook, managers. No, I'm not proposing any changes to the budget. We want to look at the treasury report format that we've had We've been modifying, make sure that we want to do it, but there's been some confusion as to, what, for instance, Manager Cook, you've even pointed out that leftover levies shouldn't be included in revenue. It should be somewhere else. So where is this money? And so that's really all I'm getting at is clarifying where the money is at.
Very good, thanks. That's a great idea. Thank you for doing that. Let me just move forward. I don't think I have too much here. I think you already highlighted those. Have you, maybe I missed it, have the materials for the legislative days been distributed? Did I miss that?
President Pedersen, Manager Cook, yes, they went out late Tuesday night or Monday night. I will resend them to you. They went to the your L Cook at RPBCWD account, which should be forwarding through to your other account, to your personal account. But
Yeah, if you could do that, I could check it. Just when I looked at this, I hadn't noticed it. So maybe you have sent it to me.
Yep, I will send it again. Not a problem.
I already brought this up during the meeting, but if you look at the local SWMP, surface water management plans, and I noticed they said Chaska submitted it. I raised the issue. I think we have a strong argument that we have jurisdiction over activities on the water to the extent it affects the bottom of the lake and the water quality, et cetera. And I would really think that we should have legal counsel look into this, because I think it behooves us to try to do something to stop this artificial but severe erosion caused by wake boats. So that's my comment. I would hope that we would move on that, because I think that's something that we can do on that basis. And just paging through, I don't have many more here. I've raised this issue before. Education outreach, bottom of page 4. I really think that the website still needs a lot of work. One thing I'll mention is that I noticed under, I think it's either what's happening or what's new or projects, I forget what it was, but I happened to come across the one of the discussions about one of the projects. And I thought it was the thing I liked about it the most was there's that great timeline. Starting out, it's a little bit like Barr's timeline, about, study, report, et cetera. And I think that's great. And I think that's something that we should be including in our monthly reports. But, that may already be accomplished by Barr's, kind of Gantt chart thing. But it struck me, it really laid it out, the whole plan, exactly each of the pieces to the plan. And I think that would be helpful for us, even if we don't have a discussion about it, but have that included in our package every month. We can just look at it and say, oh, okay, we're there, or this is where this project is at. And I can send you the link if I'm not being precise enough. I apologize. But it was a great page with great information. It's just that I think it would be great for us to have it in the packets for us to look at, probably not discuss.
Is this what Manager?
Yes, yes. You see that bar of project phase thing. That's what I think is great, and be able to show where we're at, on the project. I think that's great for us. It's great for the public, et cetera. I don't want to dwell on it anymore, but thanks very much. If you could look into that. I think all the rest were. So I noticed that we received a grant from the DNR for some AIS control. Is that for anything in particular? It says herbicide treatments, but are we looking at it for whether it be milfoil or these curly leaf pondweed?
President Pedersen, Manager We have applied for a grant for 5 lakes. We received grant funding for 3 lakes, $10,000 for Lotus Lake. We're going to look at the Fluoxetine whole lake treatment on that. And then we are looking, we received grants, staff Max will help me out. What were the other 2? Mitchell and
Yep, yeah, so we received grants for Lotus for the fluoridone treatment, Lake Susan for the flumoxacin treatment, and then Mitchell as well, Mitchell Lake for flumoxacin treatment.
I think
These
that's
are-
terrific. I want to commend you for making the applications and getting some of that state money. That I really wanted to bring that up. I think that is terrific on that basis. Let's see, I think that's probably my only comment. I have a really dumb question. Page 8. What is the SCADA system licensure and installation?
President Pedersen, managers, actually, it's not a stupid question at all, because I couldn't tell you what the acronym stands for, but it's radio telemetry system, so that it can either work through the internet where we would download the data, or you can get it to send signal to your phone to let you know when a system isn't working, or when a system is working if we wanted to get out there and sample it. So it's just a way of remote sensing when that system is working.
Okay, great. Thank you. That is all I have. Thank you very much.
Would you like to make a motion to accept the January staff report?
Also move.
I'll second.
Manager Ziegler, second. Any other questions concerning the staff report? Not seeing anything. May we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith?
On accepting the staff report, Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Patterson.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
The next item would be item D, which was receiving the regulatory report. Manager Cook, you pulled this?
Yes. May I proceed, Madam
Sure.
President? So I had a couple comments about this. I wasn't clear. I wonder if we could add something there about the permits that, or maybe I missed it, permits that get closed out, each cycle. Because, we've got applications and, we got violations, but maybe we could get at least the number of closed out. And I was thinking, maybe every quarter we could just have available, your report that, I'm always curious. I'm pretty much curious about, well, what are people getting permits for? What are they, what's the biggest thing? What's, unusual or whatever. And kind of my same comment had to do with, with violations. The one thing with the violations, sometimes I know it's mentioned and maybe sometimes I miss it, but wonder if we should be listing next steps. And so that's, and so last thing I'm concerned about the last page, and maybe if you could add a page number, that would be helpful too. But the last page of that report, we go to the no permit on the 1, 2, 3, 6, 5 single tree, and it had no responses. And and I see the follow up, but even again, we should have, I think, set up for a next step. Maybe it's wrong. I'm getting the impression that they're the people are dragging these things out, and maybe we don't have a solution as to what we should do next, but maybe it's something we should discuss.
President Patterson.
Yes.
So actually, if we could take 30 seconds or a minute and talk about this one in particular, because this actually does bring up a internal discussion that we have a lot, and that is, they came in, they didn't get a permit. They have since stabilized the site. They have revegetated it. They do have, it would be compliant with our permit requirements. Our regulatory program isn't necessarily meant to be punitive, but at the same time, they have gone through and done work that would be subject to our regulatory program. So I don't know what really would be the appropriate next step to do. And I'm not trying to dodge it. I just don't know that they are compliant now. They weren't because they never got a permit though.
Well, I appreciate that. I would just like to suggest maybe you could confer with legal counsel and see if they have an idea. I don't know if we could send them a letter saying, well, guess what? You don't reply within X days. We're gonna, we're gonna require that you remove what you did because it wasn't allowed. I mean, I don't know if we can do that, but maybe legal counsel can give us some options and rather than have these things languish out there. And you staff, you guys invest the time in chasing this stuff. We should at least be getting paid for the time you spent having to chase, a no permit application. So I don't know what the best way is. Maybe, legal does, and I would pretty much be willing to bet that, if we had to take a drastic action once, we would never have any pushback after that. But that was my point. And similar, I think to what 1591 Park Road, and maybe that's similar. So those were my comments on the report. So, thank you. I'm finished.
Manager Duval.
So I have a question for Mr. Smith, and it came up in the regulatory process at the CAC meeting by a number of people. Everybody was surprised that while we have all these rules on the books, that we really don't have any enforcement tools. Is that not true? And if so, is that the way it is with everybody? We have no authority to actually make people comply. We have a rule, but we have no enforcement ability.
Madam President, Manager Duval, I would vigorously disagree. What the district does not have, what watershed districts do not have is authority to issue fines. And you do not have peace officers at your disposal to enforce your rules or a DNR conservation officer, though sometimes there are projects where they also have an interest. You do have authority to seek enforcement of your rules through a variety of means. We recommend typically an administrative process so that there's plenty of opportunity for the alleged violator to be heard, to present their side of the story. Usually that can happen just with the staff, but if it doesn't work with the staff, then we recommend elevating it to a board hearing. And if that direction from the board isn't adequate, at that point, you've made a record of your efforts and a record of what the violations are and what the impacts to water resources are of concern. You're in a very good position to go to court. And that is where Manager Cook's statement, I think, is very true, that taking an occasional enforcement action where the rules have not been complied with and a good faith effort to seek compliance has not been productive, people will learn and word will get around that the rules are enforced, and ultimately the watershed district has full statutory authority to go to court and have the project brought into compliance and have all of your fees and costs recovered.
Good, perfect, thank you.
I guess I would have a comment in that I'd like to see the district administrator, along with Mr. Nicolay, come up with something that sort of gets sent to Lewis and maybe brought to us so that we can actually look at what to do. I think it's tough when you're in a situation where you really don't know what you can do in order to enforce something. I think we need to give some direction about what to do. Does everybody agree with that? You agree with that too, Manager Cook?
Yes, Madam President, I agree emphatically that whatever it is, we should have a process, should be documented, so that we can apply it to each and every case. And even that the permit holder or person who should be getting a permit, knows what the rules are and the consequences, because I think that pretty much motivates you. If you end up going to court, it's pretty darn expensive on that basis. So I agree with you 100%. I think it'd be appropriate for staff and to come up with something with in collaboration with Mr. Smith and his staff to be presented to us for our consideration and adoption as part of our rules. So I would agree.
Okay, great. I'm at this point looking to entertain a motion to accept the January regulatory report.
Madam President,
Yes,
so moved.
Second.
thank you, Manager Ziegler. And I believe we're to the point where we could probably take a roll call on this, Mr. Smith.
On acceptance of the regulatory report, Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is to approve the after-the-fact permit 2023-053 for the Helgeson lawn improvements. And I believe I'm thinking that District Administrator Jeffrey, would you like to talk about this or?
President Treasurer's report. President Pedersen, I believe we still have,
I believe that item F was the next item on the consent agenda that was not approved. So I believe that's the next item.
yeah, that should be adopt resolution 2414 to enter into cost share agreement with Autumn Ridge Townhomes.
No, I believe the one before that, which was approved the after the fact permit. Do I just have an older issue? I have an older, okay, thank
One
you.
before that was Grace Church Playground.
One more time then.
Yeah, because remember at that at our agenda setting meeting, we
Yes.
moved the Helgerson
Yes.
permit to the action
Okay,
at that
thank you.
point.
So
So the next item should be adopt resolution 24014 to enter into cost share agreement with Autumn Ridge Townhome Association for $19,474.24 for habitat restoration and installation and $4,875 for professional maintenance.
and you pulled this, Manager Cook. Do you have some questions?
Yes, I do. If I may proceed.
Go ahead.
First of all, I would have to say maybe this is one of the more complete, sets of documentation having to do with stewardship grants. So I appreciate the additional effort. But having said that, I think it's important to point out that I believe it's really important that we include page numbers on our documentations, and I note that the cost share funding agreement doesn't have that, not to be a stickler about these things, but they end up being important perhaps later on. And then on what I think is the third page of the agreement, I believe in the second paragraph, third line, I believe there's an errant parenthetical paren, lowercase a, close paren. I think that should be deleted, otherwise it'll lead to some confusion. And then if we go to paragraph 8 of the agreement.
Manager Cook?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I've been trying to catch up in the
Oh,
agreement.
I'm so sorry.
If you could just repeat, the
Sure.
first comment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's 1, 2, 3, the third page of the actual agreement. At the top is paragraph 5, maintenance.
Okay.
You see that?
Yep.
Okay, and then if you go under 7, second paragraph, third line, I believe there's an errant parenthetical A, because I don't see any other parentheticals.
Hmm.
At least on the draft copy I'm looking at. Third
Mine
line,
either.
nature arising from, colon, then there's a paren A, close paren.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, on that basis. And then kind of a lawyer thing, but I always try to draft agreements for those of us who are not lawyers. In paragraph 8, which very important paragraph talking about immunities, and I'm not suggesting that the language, makes it invaluable, but I would suggest that maybe in the future, Like if you go to the end of the second line, it would read something like, you know, the partner or the district doesn't waive any of its, or excuse me, the district and the partner does not waive any of its immunities in tort, just says waive no immunities in tort. Little tortured, I think, but, and then the same thing would be in the second to the last line of that paragraph. So I think we'd be better to read, do not waive their immunities in tort. Not a big deal, but I think it's a little better language. And then you go to the last page of the agreement before the signature page. It mentions here that, legal action would be taken in Carver County. I know we generally have a ability to select the cause, and I'm wondering if you want to discuss with legal counsel whether we would prefer to be in Hennepin County, if we can. Given our offices are located in Hennepin County. Not a big deal, but I think something to be considered. My last point is on the signature page. Is the true legal name Autumn Ridge Association, or is it something else? And again, I think it's always good to check, see what is actually their legal name, and you should be able to look it up on the Secretary of State's website. So sometimes it's Inc., sometimes it's, if it's a nonprofit, it doesn't necessarily have to have one, but just to make sure we have the correct legal name. And my other comment is on these projects. It's a lot of money that we're paying for these people to put in some of these projects. I'm always concerned about the amount of money we pay for maintenance. It just seems to me that if we're paying 75% of the project. I'm not sure why we're paying so much of the maintenance. It seems to me that these, especially associations, should be covering more of the maintenance. I realize this is in our policy, but I think it's worth relooking at that. So that's it. Thank you.
President Patterson, I see that the applicant, Charlene, is in the audience and her hand is up. I don't know if Charlene Spears, wanted to speak or this time.
Charlene, did you want to speak?
You were on mute if you did.
Not hearing or seeing.
Well, we can certainly look into those things. The President Patterson managers,
There she is.
You're still on mute, which
Okay,
Charlene,
I think I'm here.
there you go. Nice.
Very exciting to sit here and view this. It's wonderful citizens in action, making their lives better. So I am representing Autumn Ridge Association. The name is legally Autumn Ridge Association. We did check the Secretary of State document and we did forward that to Liz. It's been a wonderful process to learn. And what was the other question I was going to try? Oh, and the maintenance is, it will be, if it is approved, a great boon and benefit for us, because this is a small holding pond that has had serious erosion for years, and we just have to keep the maintenance up. We have, 95% of it is buckthorn and other undesirable plants. So a big feature, not just to improve the water quality eventually, is to make sure that we've got the good vegetation that really does that job for us naturally. So excited about this prospect, and this has been a wonderful learning experience.
Thank you.
President Patterson?
Yes.
And
Manager
maybe-
Crafton.
Okay, and maybe Administrator Jeffrey was going to speak to this, but if you want the project to be successful, we have already talked about this at length, and we got to do the maintenance. It's crucial to the project and the success of that investment.
That's what I was going to say.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so at this point, I am looking for a motion to adopt resolution 24-014 to enter into this cost share agreement with Autumn Ridge Townhome Association.
Madam President, I will make the motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Manager Crafton.
Madam President,
Okay. Yes.
I move to amend that motion to incorporate the changes that I mentioned as approved by and discussed between Administrator Jeffrey and legal counsel.
Are you good with those friendly amendments, Manager Duval?
Yes.
And Manager Crafton, are
Yes.
you good? Yes. Sounds wonderful. Mr. Smith, could you do a roll call vote for us, please?
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion to approve resolution 24014 carries 5-0.
We're on to the next item, which is the resolution to authorize the administrator to enter agreement with Carver County Soil and Water Conservation for technical services. You pulled this, Manager Cook. Do you have some questions or comments?
I did. Thank you. If I may proceed.
Yes.
My comment is the fact that it appeared to be very open-ended as to exactly what services Carver Soil and Water was going to be performing. And I'm always a little concerned about having a wide open agreement. And so I would like to see it narrowed with some specifics as to the type of work or the areas of work that they are going to be doing for us. As you can see in the paragraph 3, second line, starting at the end, the services will include, and the dangerous words, but not limited to. Maybe I'm missing something. But I would like to see something here that basically puts a box around the services we're going to ask them to do pursuant to, to this agreement. Whether it has to do with, I don't know, wetlands, inspections, and maybe it's all the words after included but not limited to is really what we just want to say instead of having an open-ended agreement. So that's my comment.
Manager Crafton, you have a comment?
Yes. We've had the same contract every year for a long time. And they help with our cost share projects. But I think the flexibility is really important because as we have more projects going on, the soil and water conservation districts are building in more capacity. They're getting money from the state for more capacity. I know this came up in a discussion in one of the EHAP meetings, and it's important to keep this open-ended because we want to have the flexibility for them. If they've got the expertise, they're really cheap. I mean, it's a really good way to go. So they can provide the services as needed that might come up. So the flexibility is really important for me.
Thank you.
President Pedersen, managers, I understand Manager Cook's concern and I don't disagree that an open-ended contract can be difficult, but as Manager Crafton pointed out, we've had a cooperative agreement with them for 9 years now. This will be the 10 years, or actually at the end of last year was 10 years. And the scope that they provide for us does change regularly. We have had them do everything from help out with erosion control inspections, site inspections, Avienda being a prime example of that, to we've had them go out and look when BMPs were being installed. There was a project right on the Chaska-Chanhassen border where we were unable to get out for a flood test. They went out and witnessed the flood test on our behalf. And then there is the work that they do with the cost share, the stewardship grant program. So I I will leave it to the manager's discretion. This has provided opportunity to have additional services provided by Carver Scott Soil and Water, or Carver Soil and Water Conservation District that might not otherwise have been.
Madam
purview.
President,
Yes, Manager Duval.
just follow up on that, that in essence gives flexibility to our staff. Is what you're saying.
That is correct.
So it provides flexibility to us in our meeting our needs as well.
President Pedersen, Manager DeVille, I would say that is correct.
Manager Pedersen.
Yes.
I guess I could add one more comment, and that is that Bowser really appreciates it when we do those kind of partnerships. That one year we had to provide that contract to show that we were doing work with more partners. They're very partner oriented, so.
Thank you, Manager Crafton.
Madam President.
Excuse me, Manager Ziegler.
So maybe one other way to box it in would be to say staff requested services or something to that effect, so that they're just not running around doing whatever, right? And they're not, I know it, but
yeah,
you know, if they know that it's basically when the administrator asks for it, then it's approved. That's all I had. Thank you.
Manager Cook, you had another comment.
Well, yes, generally, it's important to say this. I don't care if we've had this agreement for 150 years. Okay. That doesn't cut whether or not that's a good language or bad language. The fact that it's around for Bowser doesn't cut it. It's whether it's a good agreement or a bad agreement. It would just seem to me that we could do, with all the experience we've had with Carver, we should be able to come up with a scope of services. And, you know, I just say, I mean, I've been doing this for 40 years. You know, the typical thing would be to have an addendum which says scope of services, and you put in the garbage list. And if it really gets outside of the garbage list, I think you should be coming back to the board and saying, hey, we really, you know, we're way beyond what we think we've been doing for the past 10 years. And it doesn't take that long. So that's my suggestion every contract, to have a better box of what you're anticipating. And if it gets outside the box, and I think it behooves everybody to come back to the board and say, is this really what we want to have? And remember, if it's an emergency, we can have a phone call. If I'm correct, then Mr. Smith can correct me.
Managers, I'm looking for some sort of motion to adopt the resolution as is or with some changes to it.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the resolution 24-018 as written.
A second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Smith.
On resolution 24018, Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
No.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
Okay, we're finally to the January Treasurer's Report. Am I correct?
That is correct, President Pedersen.
Thank you.
Okay. I would like to move the January Treasurer's Report. It's been reviewed in compliance with our internal controls, procedures, and practices. I don't know if there are any questions, but.
Second.
And a second. Manager Duval seconded.
And I also would like to add that it was the September. It was presented at the October 4th meeting, the September Treasurer's Report that we tabled, and I would like to pull that off the table, and maybe that has to follow this vote first, but everything was resolved.
Okay. Manager Cook, you have a question, a comment?
Yes, if I may, Madam President.
Yes.
So I have, well, first of all, with respect to the 4M fund item on the balance sheet page, does that include the US bank accounts?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, it does.
Yes.
Yes.
So one of the questions I asked, so that, yeah, you have that number, 8,451,000, et cetera, et cetera. How does that track to, on the next page, general ledger balance, 8,490,000, and maybe I just don't understand, maybe they mean two different things. They jumped out at me as being two different numbers. Maybe they're not supposed to tie, but if not, why not?
Well, on the balance sheet, the 4M fund is made up of the liabilities, which would be things that we'd be paying, as well as $7,330,908.57, which is the other money that's in the 4M fund. I'm just trying to see what else. In here. So which was the other amount that you were talking about?
Yes,
Mary?
look at the bottom of the very next page.
Share my
Which
screen.
is, yes, and it has a different number as the general ledger balance, and just wondering why it's a different number.
You bring that up.
So if you look at page 1 of 1, 4M general fund checking, they actually, in the 4M fund balance as of 1/1, have 85,86,466 and change. And they come up with a fund balance, total fund balance of 8.49. If you go back up to
Yeah, farther up.
it's at 8771. And what I'm wondering, and what I believe this to be, is Redpath, I would use this number as our actual existing balance. So this was as of 1/1/24. I believe this is projected based upon previous investments of what we would have to this date.
Opus?
Which
And I
one
don't
are
mean
you
to interrupt, but
Oh,
Go
that's fine.
Madam President.
Yes.
Well, we don't have to sit here and resolve that, tonight, but if we come back at the next meeting and look at it on, going forward, it just, I don't know, it just doesn't jive, and maybe they're looking at two different things, but we should be able to reconcile the two as to what they are. So, but this leads me to a bigger question that, we had a discussion, maybe it's years ago already, about, how are we really preparing our financial statements? Are we really doing cash or accrual or the combination? And what is the policy that spells out, what are we looking at when we're looking at the balance sheet? Is that, cash or accrual or some combo of that? And as I pointed out before, as far as I can tell, we don't have the requisite policies and procedures adopted to answer those questions. So don't, we're not wasting time looking for the answer now, but I would like it addressed at the next meeting, if that's possible. And I know I believe you have an audit and finance meeting, coming up. So let me move on. On the top of that next page, which is the treasurer's report, there's Hennepin County and Carver County, which are our final settlements. I assume we got additional money from real estate taxes. Is that right? We got a supplemental check probably. They got a late,
When they tied out, yeah, the 11,000 and the.
yeah, they probably got a late payment or something like that,
Or they,
okay,
or
that-
delinquent payments sometimes coming in later
Sure.
than what.
That makes sense. And then, on expenses that we have $27,000 going to Smith Partners. Can I be told generally what is the what were the various categories of expenses that we incurred for that 27,000?
The work they did, sorry.
Madam President, managers.
Yes.
I don't have the invoice right in front of me, but I would believe that a significant part of it was related to litigation.
Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Smith.
So I have a follow-up question. So there's a Mark Garin and it has a $4,000 and it's called an escrow release. And then there's, if you go way down to the bottom, there's a Westwood and it has a deposit refund. Are the escrow releases different than deposit refunds? And if so, can you tell me the difference?
Yeah, President Pedersen, managers. Yeah, so the escrow is just the financial assurance that they have to put up for the project to assure its successful completion. The permit deposit is they're required to, depending on the project, it's usually $3,000. After review is done by legal and engineering, they are required to replenish that back up to $3,000 to pay for staff Nikolai's time to go out and inspect the site. If that all went well and there was $1,800 left, then that would be refunded back to the applicant.
So the escrow is the financial assurances deposits that get made as opposed to the permit fee.
Correct.
Good. Okay, great. I got it. Thank you very much. You know, I hadn't seen those kind of terms before, or I didn't notice them. Is what I should say. Yeah, given that this is the first month of the year, I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
We have a motion on the floor to accept the January treasurer's report.
On approval of the treasurer's report, Manager Crafton.
Yes.
Manager Duval.
Yes.
Manager Cook.
Is this approval or acceptance?
Acceptance.
Acceptance, forgive me.
Okay, then I'll say yes.
Manager Ziegler.
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Next item is to adopt resolution 24-015.
We need to pay the bills.
Pay the bills.
Yep.
Madam President?
President,
Yes. Manager Crafton.
okay, I had been asked to bring back off the table the one that we had tabled. So I had brought that up when I made the motion that we needed to follow up with that. So I just would like to move that we take the September treasurer's report that was presented in October 4th meeting off the table and accept it.
I would like to make a motion to accept the September
Or you can just, yeah,
what? Treasurer's report.
that was presented at the October 4th meeting.
Do I hear a second? Oh, okay. Here a second. Thank you. Any questions?
Well, Madam President,
Yes.
you know, without seeing it again, I don't know how I'm gonna vote to approve it or accept it, since I don't know if I was one of them, but along with maybe Manager Crafton had issues, you know, with that report. So I move that we table this till the next meeting so that I have a chance to look at the approved report.
Do I hear a second to Manager Cook's motion? Hearing no second, the motion fails. Back to voting on the resolution to adopt the September treasurer's report. Mr. Smith.
On accepting the September treasurer's report, Manager Crafton.
Yes.
Manager Duval.
Yes.
Manager Cook.
No.
Manager Ziegler.
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
Now I believe we are going to adopt the resolution for approving payment of the bills 24-015. Do I hear a motion?
I'll move that motion.
I'll second.
Manager Crafton, Manager Ziegler. Any questions? Hearing none. The vote, please, Mr. Smith.
On resolution 2415, payment of bills, Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval.
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, now I believe we are talking about approving the after-the-fact permit 2023-053 Helgeson Lot Improvements. And Mr. Jeffrey, would you like to talk about this?
President Pedersen, yes, I will introduce it. I know that Mr. Helgeson and I believe his legal counsel, is your legal counsel with you, Mr. Helgeson?
Yes, that's correct. Sean Renford.
Okay, so are here
Thank
and
you.
would appreciate an opportunity to speak to this. So the city of Chanhassen contacted us some months back about some work that was being done on Mr. Helgerson's property. Let me share my screen and help out a little bit with it. And I might have to ask Matt Nicolai questions as we come along, but in general, the work that was being done was a berm was being installed or the patio work that was being done. Upon investigation, looking at aerial photographs, it appeared that an addition was made to the home in previous years. In total, these all exceed the threshold for requiring a permit from the Riley Purgatory Bluff Creek Watershed District. We have prepared a staff report for you to review. The staff report and plans as shown will be compliant with our rules. You will also note that there are additional documents that has been provided by their neighbor, Joe Pavelko, who was concerned about some cross-access rights and easement rights of his. However, that is outside of our purview of review. We know that the property itself, the underlying property, is owned by Mr. Helgerson, and therefore move forward. I guess I would let the managers ask questions, or if they want to hear from the applicant at this time, that would probably be good.
Mr. Helgeson, would you like to comment? You're on mute, sir.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I guess I'm going to have Sean Redford just get the issues started here, and I'll weigh in. I guess I want to just make it very clear that when we made this, we submitted for this addition with Lisi Construction back in 2015. There was never anything from the city's approval of our permit. There was never anything mentioned to us from the city that we needed to go to the watershed district. This happened to be commensurate with the same exact year as this. I guess there were some new regulations, expanded regulations that Lisi was not aware of at that point, because our project started the very beginning of 15. And so I just want it known that I didn't purposefully or knowingly move forward with my project, knowing that there were these new regulations. I was unaware, and my general contractor, Lisi Construction, which I'm sure you are all aware of Lisi Construction, they're a very formidable, reputable company. And so I was unaware of any of these regulations. And so that's point one. Point two is when it was discovered that, we had gone beyond these regulations, I complied, and I seeded the area around my pond with these native grasses, so that to be in compliance with the watershed district. But I was unaware that then I was going to be required to sign what is I guess a attached to my title. What do you call it, Sean?
The maintenance declaration.
The maintenance declaration, which then comes with some fairly I guess it's not really exact what how much maintenance I can do on this, because I don't want to have some very unattractive, unruly looking grasses in my front yard, in front of my pond. And so I've already planted the seeds, and I had it done professionally. Spent $1,500 doing that, and I just, number one, I would like to be able to manicure that, in a way that is so that it's not unruly looking. And thirdly, I want everyone to understand that I've lived here for 20 years, and I have asked, okay, so my property sits at an elevation of 60 feet below Pleasant View Road. So there's a ton of water that comes tumbling down the hill and my driveway, which is a shared driveway, and it goes piling into the lake without any sedimentation filtering. And I have offered both to the watershed district and to the city of Chanhassen to allow them to do a submersible drainage system with filters, so that you have a far more efficient system than relying on these native grasses. And I've made those offers, and no, I've had no, follow through. And this has been this has been going on for 18 years. And yet I'm being told to put these grasses in, and this submersible system would be far superior. And I just don't understand. It's not making any sense to me, because the watershed district and the city of Chanhassen realize that there's a problem, because this water comes barreling down through the culvert from the other side of Pleasant View Road, and it washes out everything when there's a big rain. So these native grasses are going to do no good compared to the system that I've offered. And so I want everyone to understand that I am not a dissident resident. I'm a very compliant resident, and I was unaware of these rules, as was Lisi. I've been in the real estate business for 41 years. I kind of understand this, and I've tried to be accommodating. And it is a real issue when you've got a 60-foot drop from a fairly major road.
Thank you, Mr.
And
Hellison.
yet we're arguing over these native grasses, and I'm not saying arguing.
You have any other comments?
Sean?
Yeah, just a few things, Madam President and managers. Thank you. This is my first time having the pleasure to be before you. It was fun to hear that there's a collaboration with Carver Soil and Water. I've worked with them quite a bit. Terry Myler is a great guy over there. And I also want to emphasize that as I've been working over the last several months with Mr. Nicklay, I appreciate his responsiveness, and he has been good to work with. And so I would consider that a positive in his column there. I do represent the Helgesons here. I do want to highlight a couple of things. Number one, the most recent project that was completed just this last year, a little bit of additional berm work and the installation of a patio, that project area, as I understand it, falls well under the permit, the 5,000 square foot disturbed area threshold for triggering the rules. And so that piece of the work itself, I don't believe was truly relevant to all of this. I think what, as was presented, is correct, that the work that was done in 2015 did encompass a larger area. And as Mr. Helgeson explained, he wants the board to truly understand that he's not a cowboy just doing whatever he wants with the property. He was relying on professionals to advise him on this, and that ultimately didn't get communicated. And so he is trying to fix this now. Mr. Nickley has commented to me that his impression is that the Helgesons have been trying to comply. They have been cooperative. That continues to be the case here. They did do the planting of the grasses, and we're kind of near the finish line here. One of the key concerns my client has with this maintenance declaration is, what is it that he is going to be able to do and not do in maintaining these grasses? He does have some safety concerns. He has young grandchildren that do come to his house and visit if they're playing down by the water. And if these grasses get to a certain height, is it create a safety issue if a small child falls in the water and not able to see it? In addition to the aesthetics, of course, he'd like to have the ability to do occasional cutting and trimming, which I believe the standard language of the maintenance declaration does allow, but it wasn't entirely super clear to us, and maybe there's some ambiguity there as to what level of trimming and cutting Mr. Helgeson can do that will still allow the grasses to perform their filtering function while also balancing out the other factors that I've just laid out. So that is one outstanding question that we have. Another question here is I've looked at the report that Mr. Nickley prepared, and I didn't see this report until just recently, but I noticed that there are two additional, I think, contingent, or I say conditions to approval that are still outstanding. In addition to the execution and recording of the maintenance declaration, two additional things would be that a site plan needs to be updated to show that the grass strip extends to a full length. And that's not super clear to me exactly what that site plan is going to need to show. So I'm looking for some clarity there. And then the other one was, I believe there's a request for an additional permit fee deposit. And that was also a new thing to me that hadn't been previously raised. And so I had some questions there as to exactly how the mechanics of that work.
Thank you, Mr. Redford. Would you like to respond?
President Pedersen, managers. I can respond to all of those. So the buffer itself, what our rules say is they must be maintained as native vegetation that provides the ecological and habitat functions. That would not preclude biannual cutting to foster regeneration of it, but it would preclude mowing of it and maintaining it as a lawn. There are numerous low grass prairies that will only grow to 8 to 12 inches. So you can address the safety concern with that. Regarding the what is meant by the length of the buffer, it must extend from property line to property line. So it must encompass that wetland area that was excavated in the DNR public water. So those are those two. Regarding the fee, the fees are to recoup the time and expenses of the district. And then the $200 deposit is to pay for any inspections that need to occur, and then that would be refunded if there's any balance left in that.
So basically, you're recommending this after the fact permit be approved?
We are recommending it for approval with the conditions as presented in the staff report, and that being a buffer be established and maintained. The length of the wetland that is on Mr. Helgerson's property.
Any of the managers have any questions or comments?
Madam President.
Yes.
Well, I have concerns if there is some lack of understanding about the requirements, and if that's the case, then I think those questions or issues should be submitted to staff in writing and respond, and that we shouldn't be issuing, I'm sorry, we shouldn't be issuing a, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry, shouldn't be issuing a permit if there are these outstanding issues. We have a maintenance declaration. If they don't understand that, then we can work to clarify that if that's the appropriate result. But I think it's important to, the question has been raised by Mr. Pavelka regarding item, I guess if you go page 6 of 7. And we go to applicable general requirements, item number 3. So there is an issue, it seems to me, that has been raised by the neighbor as to whether or not, granting this permit would end up complying with item number 3. And so I think it's behooves us to have legal counsel review this issue. Also, at the same time, then staff should be working with Mr. Helgeson and his attorney, if necessary, to clarify the maintenance agreement, maintenance, requirements, et cetera. So I guess I would move that this be either tabled or be rejected until these issues have been resolved.
Is there a second to that motion?
What is the motion?
The motion is to table it or resolve the issues with this before we vote on it.
I'll second it.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
May I ask a question of clarity here? I'm sorry.
Sure.
There's been a suggestion here that the neighbor, Mr. Pavelka, had raised an issue under this number 3 of general requirements. It's not clear to me exactly what his objection is. Is he here today to make that objection?
I don't believe so, is he?
It is in the, he has submitted a memorandum which is attached to this item on the website. You can find his objection in there. President Pedersen, managers, in the interim, I would like to state that this buffer requirement has been made of hundreds of applicants, and they have been able to comply with it. I don't know what more we could do to clarify it. I mean,
Yeah, I don't think that we have a problem complying with it. Do you, Sean?
No, I don't. I think we're good there. I think some of the answers we got were helpful here. I did look at the attachment that was included with this agenda item, and all that I see there, I think there's a copy of an old easement, a driveway easement agreement, and a couple of surveys. I didn't see any memorandum that outlines the concerns, unless I'm looking in the wrong place.
no, President Pedersen.
Yes,
no,
Mr. Jeffrey.
You're right. When did we first bring this before the board? And it got tabled. He believes that there are easement rights that he has across your property that this has been constructed over. Our position to him had been that there are encumbrances on all sorts of properties, and it's not incumbent upon the district to adjudicate those encumbrances and chase after all of them. The underlying land is owned by Mr. Helgeson. And it becomes a private matter between neighbors. But I'm going to let a lawyer speak to it.
Mr. Smith.
Madam President, managers, we have reviewed that question, and really the relevant thing before the board here is the activity on the Helgeson property and bringing it into compliance with the district rules. The activity we're describing all takes place on the Helgeson property.
Okay.
There apparently is an issue with a neighboring property owner. It is not within the district's jurisdiction to adjudicate it.
Okay.
Whatever dispute they have, they can pursue between them.
Madam President,
Yes, Manager Cook.
with all due respect to, Attorney Smith, then I have to ask, why do we have paragraph 3, in the applicable general requirements? And, especially if we know that there's a dispute, I mean, this is a requirement. You're not, as I quote, involves the taking, using, or damaging of any property rights of any other person, etc. So I'm just saying, I think we need to, obviously there's still questions out there, despite what Mr. Helgeson and his attorney have just tried to say. They raised questions. So their questions I don't think they were specifically addressed. I think they need to be addressed, and this needs to be, sorted out. But, when we know of an existing problem and we got language that arguably covers this, I don't see how we can, go forward on this. So again, the motion's on the table to, table this, and let's hope staff and those can outline it and, bring it back next month and address it.
Let's vote on the motion to table it. How about that?
Well, may I speak to that?
Yes, Mr. Helgeson.
So I just want to speak to the idea that we do understand. We're clear on the maintenance. We just wanted to verify. So I'm clear, and Sean, you're clear.
Yes.
On the maintenance. I wanted to be clear with the board that I mean, this was brought up. This declaration was brought to the board, so we had to show up. I just wanted to get some clarification. I have clarification on the maintenance declaration, so I'm good there. And I wanted to make sure that the board understood that I was always trying to be cooperative. And so I don't have any issues as far as moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Helgeson. I think we
You're
should
welcome.
proceed with the vote.
President Pedersen, before you
Yes.
do, I just want to let Mr. Redford know where he can go find that materials. If you go to the January 10th meeting on our website, you'll find it under that same item. Thank you. Apologize for that.
Thank you.
On the motion to table, Manager Crafton,
No,
Manager Duval,
No.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Ziegler,
No.
President Pedersen.
No.
Motion fails 1-4.
And do I hear a motion to accept the after the fact permit on the Helgeson lot?
I'll move that. Is there a number we have on that?
Yes.
Is 2023-053.
Yes.
should probably point out where the concerns are, the
Oh, yeah.
conditions.
Okay, so I'd like to make a motion or to accept
the permit 2023 or approve the permit 2023, subject to the conditions and stipulations set forth in the recommendations section of the attached report. Second.
And Manager Duval seconds. And do we have any further comments before we vote on this motion?
Yes, Madam President.
Yes.
Again, I'll just repeat, I don't see how we can vote to approve this when the evidence, testimony, statements before us show that there is a dispute as to whether or not item number 3, has been, is being complied with. And, I'm not interested in having the district in between an issue like that. I think, that needs to be, worked out. And I have to say that I am not convinced, by the, change of rhetoric from the beginning of Mr. Helgeson and his attorney's statement until the most recently concluded, statement. So, I don't think we should be approving this this application. It's certainly not until everything, all the I's have been dotted, T's crossed, et cetera, giving not one, but 2 instances of having not complied with our rules. And as Mr. Helgeson's attorney knows, ignorance, doesn't excuse it. So I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Manager Cook. Anybody else have any other comments before we vote?
I do.
Yes.
So would it be appropriate to, in light of the discussion we've had here, to strike that number 3 from the application general requirements? Mr. Smith, would that,
I would say not.
the part that's dealing with the legalese of, would it be appropriate to remove that section in the motion here, just to approve it, removing that item number 3?
Madam President, Manager Duval, I don't believe so. But I think we can, after this matter, take a look at that language and discuss that more generally.
So it's not an issue.
The issue
It's not,
that's been raised, such as it's been raised, is not anything that the watershed district is in a
Okay.
position to resolve.
okay, thank you.
Okay, let's vote on the motion, please. And this would be to adopt resolution after the fact permit 2023-053.
On Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
No.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
Okay, thank you. Next item is to consider permit 2023-04445 on the Avienda Row Homes variance request from Rule B. Scott?
President Pedersen, managers, I'm going to
Yeah.
share my screen and I will walk you through the variance request. So managers, what you have before you is the 3rd phase of the Avienda development. If you remember, the Avienda development was originally permitted underneath permit 2018-016. Phases 1 and 2 were covered underneath that permit, which covered, if you look in the upper left portion of the screen, it covered the roadways on the parcel, as well as some area off to the far west, some townhomes. The permit that you have before you today is looking at the parcel that is outlined in red. That was mass graded underneath the prior permit and will now be redeveloped per se to allow for some row homes. The upper left again is the way the site looks out there today. And if we look down then in the lower right, you can see how they're looking to develop the far western portion of the site, that red outlined area. So the site itself covers about 43 acres. They're looking to do work or disturb land on little over 8 acres of that parcel to construct 53 row homes, a number of different buildings, the streets, the utilities, the stormwater facilities. From the stormwater facilities perspective, what they're proposing is they're proposing 2 tree trenches in the areas that show the green stars. They're proposing 1 underground stormwater treatment chamber, the brown star, a biofiltration basin on the eastern edge of where they want to do work. And then they're also looking at modifying a couple of existing basins that were constructed underneath the prior permit. There are no wetlands that remain on the site, but there are wetlands that are downstream from the site that do receive runoff from the site. In terms of the overall compliance for the project, the rules that are implemented here are Rule B, the floodplain management, Rule C, erosion control, Rule J, the stormwater management rule. They've requested a variance. Then there's the permit fees and the financial assurance. They will be compliant with the erosion control provisions rule once they provide the name of the individual who will be responsible for erosion control practices during construction. The majority of the stormwater management features on the site will be compliant for rate control, volume, water quality, low floors, maintenance. Once a declaration is recorded, then they'll be compliant. And then as a stipulation of the permit, we're also including a recommendation that they need to include the chloride management plan. Moving back up to the floodplain rule, you'll notice, does it conform with the Riley Purgatory Bluff Creek Watershed District rules? There's a red no listed there. They are requesting a variance from providing compensatory storage within the same floodplain as the water body that they are affecting. And that's what I'll step through now, is we'll just step through the variance and what's implicated and how they've resolved to come over the hurdle and offset the variance. What you've got up on the screen here are the general criteria from the rule. I'll get into these more as we get into each individual criteria and I walk through it. But in short, they're looking for a variance from providing compensatory storage within the floodplain of the water body that they're disturbing. They are disturbing 2 existing water bodies on the site. The basin to the north, they are disturbing. If we look at the aerial photo, you can see more of the triangular shape of the basin. You look on the right side, they are grading that and cutting off part of the triangle, the far western edge. But then they are also then expanding to the south to provide compensatory storage for that basin. That one is compliant. There's also an existing stormwater filtration basin that was constructed as part of the first permit that they are looking at completely filling and replacing with an underground stormwater chamber system. So because they're replacing one stormwater facility with a different one, the volume being provided is not within the same floodplain. In addition to that, they are also looking at changing some of the drainage patterns to further provide protection and mitigate the impacts of the variance request, which we'll get into. So the first criteria is how substantial is the variance from the rule provision. So the basin that they are filling is basin 47. Currently, they're proposing to fill with about 3,300 cubic yards of material. The basin that they're proposing, or the underground chamber at that site, would only provide roughly 1,300 cubic yards of volume. So that's roughly a 62% shortfall from what would be required in that same area. To offset that, they're constructing the biofiltration basin with significantly more volume, so the net increase in storage provides more storage, flood storage, than what's out there today. This flood storage that they're proposing is also going to be used for stormwater management on the site. The second criteria and third, usually analyze these together because they're closely tied, is does it affect government services? and whether the variance will substantially change the character of or cause material adverse impacts to water resources, flood levels, drainage, or general welfare of the district. Got three points here that I'd just like to make the managers aware of. Because the proposed project will reduce the site discharge volumes and rate leaving the site relative to existing conditions, it's not reasonably likely to cause adverse offsite impacts. Because the project provides a net increase in storage for stormwater management, and again, is reducing the peak rates, it's not likely to have adverse impact on governmental services, downstream resources, flood levels, or neighboring properties. Really, this variance only impacts the applicant's property. What technical measures did the applicant implement to offset the need for the variance? They've created additional flood storage in the biofiltration basin so that there's a net increase in flood storage on the site. They're looking at redirecting a portion of the watershed. And on the screen, what we have, I'm showing with the black outline over the aerial photo is the existing watershed area that drains to the existing filtration basin that's out there. On the right next to it, I've outlined in black the area that will drain to the new underground chamber. They've essentially redirected most of that watershed, or 5.8 acres of it, to their proposed stormwater biofiltration basin. So we've got more storage, plus they've redirected the runoff to that storage to offset the shortfalls. And then the last criteria here is, how did the practical difficulty occur? Well, the practical difficulty occurred because the applicant wants to replace the existing surface BMP with an underground BMP. Because the project will change the stormwater routing on the site, results in a net increase in flood storage, and only impacts the applicant's property, we're finding that there is adequate technical basis for the managers to rely on to grant the requested variance. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
All right, so we've got surface water storage presently. Is that what you're saying? And we
Correct.
want to put that in the ground.
Correct.
And so if you have a huge storm event, you're saying, so where does the underground water go again?
So the existing BMP that was installed as part of the original construction, it's a surface basin. They're looking at creating an underground storage system that then would ultimately drain in the same direction as the existing surface
Drain
facility.
where?
It drains to the south to a wetland. And they've provided analysis showing that that drainage to the wetland does not increase the bounce in the wetland, the inundation time, and actually show that they are meeting the water quality criteria to help protect that wetland.
So it's not going to degrade the wetland.
Correct.
Thank you.
Manager Duval, or Ziegler.
So I think I know the answer to this, but in the prior permit, well, they, filled the wetlands and graded this section. They didn't increase the runoff then either, though, did they? Or, it seems like, the wetlands are now gone, but are we taking that into account, that, there was water going into these wetlands? I guess I'm not sure how to explain this, but it seems like they're stacking projects and getting them approved individually. But each time we're making sure that they're not increasing the runoff, correct?
President Pedersen, Manager Ziegler, yes, you are correct. That is one of the challenges that they faced with this site is it was mass graded back with the prior permit, right? And at that time, they had to provide compensatory storage for filling of those wetlands that was allowed by the city. They had to provide rate control, and they had to provide water quality. with this new permit coming in, they have designed it in such a way that the peak discharge rates are at or below the permit that was issued previously. So they aren't increasing back above what was already permitted. They are actually lower than the prior permit.
Thank you.
Did you have any
Yes,
question?
I have a question also. So the city of Chanhassen, they originally approved this project, or they approved this current version of the project? And my question is there overlap between our jurisdiction and what the city approves? It seems like we had an issue on another project in the past where there was some question about the city approved something that goes beyond what they could approve, and then we're forced with overriding a city decision to approve. Is there anything in here that relates to that?
President Pedersen, Manager DeVal. The city approval process and the district's approval process are completely independent. But there are times when the city has land use authority and they can approve what land use happens on the land, and then the district needs to apply its rules to that situation to provide for resource protection. So there can be some rubs, I'll call them, right?
Okay. And I guess the other question, it relates, but not directly. I think there was some mention of 10-year water levels versus 100-year benchmarks. And with everything that's going on in the news, I'm just wondering how close are we to re-examining what those benchmarks are? We use all the benchmarks in your analysis. And is that a factor at all? And it may be a factor, but maybe irrelevant, I guess. But I'm just throwing it out as a general question.
President Pedersen, Manager DeVal. That is a really good question. And it's something that I know Administrator Jeffrey and I have talked about in the past, because you're correct. The current regulatory framework is based off of Atlas 14, which looks at climate information through essentially 2010. So now we've got 14 more years worth of data, and the government is working on an Atlas 15 to update that, as well as to take in climate projections. And that's something that, if a rule revision were to come through, something that we'd want the board to consider would be to try to implement that future looking climate information into the regulatory program to be more proactive rather than reacting based on old data.
So are you saying it's relevant or not relevant to this?
It is not relevant to this because it's currently not part of the program.
Current law, current practices, rules.
Right.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Manager Cook, did you have any questions, comments?
I did, Madam President. May I proceed?
Yes.
So a question I have going back to pre-excavation work, were there wetlands on this property?
Manager Cook, yes, there were extensive wetlands on this property prior to the project going in. There was a large wetland complex. You can see on the screen, I'm circling, there was a large wetland complex sitting in the middle of the property, and then a couple of smaller wetlands working their way to the east.
So where was the compensation for the elimination of these wetlands?
That compensatory storage was provided in this northern basin, as well as part of the southern basin.
President Pedersen,
Yes.
managers, if you're referring to the mitigation for those wetlands, Weber, Minnesota and Lac Parley County, Minnesota.
Where are they?
Yeah.
So where they went and bought the 3X
Correct.
Right.
Yep,
Correct.
that's where they got their credits.
on that basis. So we're now eliminating part of the, arguably, if it's a pond, it's a wetland. And so now we're allowing them to eliminate part of the wetland and replace it with a tank. Is that an accurate statement?
President Patterson, Manager Cook. A wet pond, a detention pond does have some wetland characteristics. So yes, they are losing some wetland, some terrestrial benefit of that water feature by putting it underground.
Well, on that
Not-
basis, I
yeah.
would say it would seem to me that one, the city would have to approve, should be involved in approving that. Secondly, it would seem to me it would require compensatory wetlands somewhere. And so this is an issue to me. It's kind of like, okay, we'll go through another iteration and everybody will forget about the way it was when we first started this process. And I'm not in favor of that.
President Patterson, Manager Cook. Unfortunately, it's not a jurisdictional wetland, so that's why the city wouldn't have to look at it because they did not. Prior to 2017, you could use what were called public value credits, and then you could get up to 50% of your mitigation credits out of stormwater ponding. And if that were the case, then it would be jurisdictional, and the city would have to make them replace those public value credits. In this case, it's just what the board would think is the ecological benefit of a stormwater pond, period. So accurate.
President Pedersen, if I can add.
Yes.
Just to clarify, well, they are replacing an existing filtration basin with an underground chamber. They are constructing a large biofiltration basin on the eastern portion of their site, as well as 2 areas with tree trenches. So they are adding a lot of trees as well.
Well, I'm not against trees on that basis, but you raised the point about the one where the purple star is. That's going to be water retention?
It will be
Did I
water
understand this correctly?
Correct.
So combined, can you tell me, is the combined volume of, or area or volume of surface water retention the same or greater under the proposal when it was pre-proposal? Am I making sense?
President Pedersen, Manager Cook, it is larger under proposed conditions than under the current conditions, the way it's out there today.
Okay, that answered my question. Thank you.
Patterson,
Yes, Manager Crafton.
does this have anything to do with the $300,000 that we got to do the wetland restoration?
Can you repeat the question?
So as part of President Patterson Managers, as part of the mitigation, the Avienda Group, Level 7 Group, gave $300,000 to the city of Chanhassen to implement some type of off-site mitigation, whether it be forest restoration somewhere or whatever. They use that actually on the Pioneer wetland. They used it to acquire that one house, the third house in it. That wasn't quite the full 300,000, but pretty close.
But it was at least related to the territory within the district.
Right.
Yep.
Administrator Jeffrey, Manager, there's a hand.
Stephen Zabriskie.
He's actually the applicant's engineer.
Oh. Yes, shall we recognize Mr. Zabriskie? Is that what his last name is? Mr. Zabriskie, you have your hand up. We don't see you or hear you.
I wasn't speaking. Thank you, Madam President and members. I just wanted to clarify that basin that we are converting to an underground basin. I think Scott sort of touched on it a little bit, but it is a stormwater management facility. It is not a wetland, nor is it actually even a wet pond. It is a dry filtration basin. So, I just think it's important to recognize that the purpose of it was to solve for the constructed stormwater needs of the project site. That actually accepted some of the right-of-way from Bluff Creek Boulevard with the first 2 phases of construction. And actually, if we roll back the clock a little bit, that basin was always intended to be converted to an underground basin, although the developer didn't have firm plans for exactly what was going to be built through this entire project. We didn't know exactly what it was going to look like, so the open air filtration basin was really only intended to be a temporary or an interim basin that would always be converted to something similar to this.
So we need to decide what we were going to do here.
We have a motion on the floor yet?
No motion.
Make a motion to approve. I don't know the number of the
2023-045.
The variance.
Just the
right,
variance.
to approve the variance.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to approve the variance.
Madam President, I'd recommend, there's recommended language for approval of the variance, and I trust the motion is adopting that language.
Yeah.
I just can't open my computer to read.
Okay, all right.
Maybe someone can.
I can help you.
And maybe you could read it off.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What are all the stipulations that
All
are
right.
recommended by engineering?
Is that what's in the
Variance action.
document?
President Patterson, managers, if you are ready, I will read it.
Okay.
Where to start? Resolved that the variance request for permit 2023-045 from compliance with Rule B, subsection 3.2B is approved based on the facts and analysis provided by the RPBC WD engineer below and placed in the record at the February 7th, 2024 meeting of the managers, and the manager's findings in the record of the February 7th meeting. And it's not subject to any following conditions, so I'm going to leave that out.
Okay. Would you like to take a roll call, Mr. Smith?
Didn't get a second.
Madam President,
I'll second.
I think she did second.
Yes, Manager Cook.
well, I guess the question I have is, we're granting a variance based upon the proposed, I guess, reconfiguration, right, that was submitted. So it strikes me, we have conditions in all of our other permits basically invoking, all the conditions, et cetera, and the plans, et cetera, that we've, typically as part of this. So I'm concerned that we don't have at least the conditions being that, it's constructed, don't we have the typical constructed as, per the plans, blah, 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 blah. We have our standard language.
President Pedersen?
Yes,
Mr.
Mr. Sobiech.
Understanding is currently the board is considering only the variance request.
Yes.
The additional conditions that are typically applied and are recommended to be applied to this permit as well would come with the approval of the permit, which the board is next on the agenda to consider.
Does that answer your question, Manager Cook?
Well, not adequately in my mind, only because, and maybe I haven't thought about this before on variances, but we're approving this variance because the applicant for the variance is going to be doing X, Y, and Z. And so what do we how do we make sure that they're going to be doing X, Y, and Z as the condition to this variance? And I realize they're related, but in some respects, I think that's always been the difficulty I've had with, kind of segregating the variance from the actual board action. I don't know if Mr. Smith has any thoughts.
Madam President, Manager Cook, I guess our assessment would be that before you can consider the permit and the conditions that you would attach with approval of the permit to the project, you need to consider this specific variance from the district's rules. And the district's variance rule lays out the 6 criteria that the engineer has analyzed and based on his analysis recommended that the variance be granted. So the motion before the board to grant the variance is based on the findings relating to those 6 criteria.
Which are all based upon the proposed action with, I mean, you understand what I'm saying is, the variance works because they're saying we're going to do X, Y, and Z. If they don't do X, Y, and Z, they don't get the variance. So I'm just concerned that this resolution it doesn't have any conditions, it being maybe number one, that, construction be done consistently. And I realize that's also a condition to giving a permit, but I don't see where we grant variances without conditions. So that's where I'm at.
President Pedersen,
Yes, Manager Crafton.
it seems to me we already started down this path the first time we approved this.
Right.
And what Engineer Sobiak has put forth is actually reducing the peaks. It's in compliance with our rules. So I don't see that we have much choice in terms of asking for something more because we already started down this path before. And while it's not ideal, until we change our rules, this is what we got.
And we are in fact gaining more storage space
Right.
in that biofiltration. So that's why I'm in favor of it, because at least there's more to it
Right.
than what's currently planned for it. So
Well, Madam President,
yes.
it's not a point of being against it. My only point is to make sure that we've drawn our box around the variance that we're granting. And I guess I don't know if the language is adequate as I look at it. So,
Let's proceed
this
with
is this is an issue I've had before about our resolution, about our reports. Our general, conditions, et cetera, and our findings, et cetera, internally legally consistent, and do we have a consistent checklist that we go through every time to make sure we've dotted our I's and crossed our T's? And this has just brought it to the forefront again in my mind that perhaps we could be doing a better job in crafting the recommendations and requirements, in the report, that it would be easier to deal with. So
Let's proceed with the vote. Mr. Smith.
On granting the variance as set forth in the report, Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
yes.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
And now we are on to approving the permit 2023-045 for the Avienda Row Homes as presented.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve the permit 2023-045 with the stipulations listed by the engineer, and maybe somebody can read off what the motion for the.
And do I have a second?
I'll second.
Manager Duval, second. Would you like to read this for us, please, Mr. Smith? He can't get it. I'm sorry.
So
Madam President,
Yes.
can I just suggest that the resolution, that the resolution reiterate the language of the permit application review set forth on the first page thereof, beginning immediately after the words proposed board action.
yes,
Thank you, Manager Cook. Sounds great to me. Okay, I think we can go forward with the vote.
Manager Crafton, Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0 at 10:04 PM.
Yes. Okay, we're at 10:04. We kind of said we were going to try to do this to stop at around 10-ish. So at this point, it looks like maybe, are we looking at a continuance, or would you rather have these items placed on next month's agenda?
President Pedersen, managers, unless Engineer Sobiak cracks me upside the head, I don't see any reason that these couldn't wait until the March meeting.
Okay.
So, Madam President,
Yes.
assuming that Mr. Sobiak has not cracked Administrator Jeffrey on the side of the head, I am going to move that the remaining items on our agenda for action, at least, be carried over to the next regular scheduled meeting of the board.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Manager Ziegler. Okay, I think that's that. Is there anything else that we
Still
absolutely?
have to vote.
I know. Oh, sorry.
Well, but President Pedersen, before
Yes.
you do vote, there is one thing I would like to just remind managers, March 6th and 7th is the Minnesota Watersheds Legislative Day. Manager Cook, I will get you that information to make certain that you have it. If you'd like me to sign you up, Manager Ziegler, you've already reached out to me. Let me know. I'll sign everybody up at the same time. And if you didn't get the information, let me know that as well. I'll get it to you. That's all.
Yeah, I don't need the hotel part, just.
Yeah, I figured you probably.
No, that's kind of fun. You get a lot of people.
I think we're ready for the
So-
vote.
So, point of order, so
Yes.
when is the next board meeting?
March 13th. It was moved to the 13th
Okay.
because the 6th and 7th was the legislative days.
Okay.
Yeah. Now we're ready for the vote.
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes, and thank you all very much for helping me through the meeting.
You're welcome.
She said.
Madam President?
Okay, do we need a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I heard that as a motion. to-
Okay, thank you so much. Didn't hear you, sorry. I need a second. We got a second.
Oh, I thought
And a roll call, please.
So we laid over all
I had
the
heard that.
items.
Manager Cook, was that a motion to adjourn your last motion? I thought it was.
Pretty much so, yes.
Yeah, I think we're adjourned.
Okay.
we're good.
Okay, we're good. Thank you.
You're good, thanks.
Thanks.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Good night.